One word that comes to mind when describing hip-hop legend Tupac Shakur is prolific. Once that man's rap career got started, he never stopped. Tupac gave us 44 singles, 50 music videos, 9 compilation projects, 4 studio albums while he was alive, and 7 more after he died. Let's not forget that his acting performance as the troubled teenager Bishop in the 1992 movie Juice opened him up to getting film roles too, all of which were starring roles. Pac co-starred with Janet Jackson in Poetic Justice, Marlon Wayans in Above the Rim, Mickey Rourke in Bullet, Tim Roth in Gridlocked, and he even starred in Gang Related. Tupac popped up in a bunch of TV shows in the 90s like A Different World, In Living Color, and even showed up on Saturday Night Live. But after selling over 36 million albums in the United States alone, over 75 million worldwide, and earning 5 #1 albums on the Billboard 200, we have to remember one crazy detail. Tupac put in all of that work in about 5 short years. Between the March to August 1991 recording of his debut album, Tupacalypse Now, which dropped on Interscope on November 12, 1991, and his fatal shooting on September 7, 1996, that brought him to his fatal demise 6 days later on September 13, 1996, Tupac created a lifetime of rap history in just half a decade. Even 26 years later, in 2022, Tupac still lands on all kinds of greatest rapper of all time lists and top 5s as well. In fact, Kendrick Lamar was only 9 years old the year Tupac was killed, but he was clearly inspired by the elder icon who also worked with super producer Dr. Dre. Kendrick Lamar told the story of how Tupac and Dr. Dre were in Kendrick's Compton neighborhood shooting the music video for California Love back in 1995. Kendrick told the story to the Recording Academy stating, "I was about 8 years old." Kendrick later recalled to the Recording Academy, "They were shooting a video in my neighborhood in Compton. My father sees them, went 2 blocks down and got me. By the time he got me, everybody was out there. It was pandemonium. He put me on his shoulders, and there they was, Dr. Dre and Tupac right there. I think it was a white Bentley. That moment right there, whether I knew it or not, branched me off to what I'm doing now. It was already designed in destiny. 15 years later, I meet Dr. Dre, and I explain that story to him, and he remembered that same exact moment, and he remembers them kids that were out there. And I said, Dre, I was one of the kids that were there. It's a crazy feeling." So how exactly did 5 years of Tupac's heavy output and success end with his still unsolved murder, legally speaking? Let's backtrack to the final 24 hours of Tupac Shakur's shooting, the situations that led up to it, and the people that were around Pac that day. If you rewind one day before Tupac got shot, it would be roughly 11:30 p.m. on September 6, 1996, when he was leaving Lacey Street Production Studios in downtown Los Angeles. This is where he finished shooting a music video for the song Toss It Up, featuring the R&B singers Casey and JoJo from Jodeci, Aaron Hall, and Danny Boy. Toss It Up would end up being the lead single from the Don Killuminati The 7 Day Theory, Tupac's first posthumous album after his death under his stage name Machiavelli. After putting in work on the music video, Tupac drives back to his mansion in the LA suburb of Calabasas and sleeps for a few hours. On the morning of September 7th, 1996, Pac's cousin, Jamal El-Hussein, reminds him that they have to leave LA for a trip to Las Vegas to celebrate the birthday of one of Pac's business partners, music video producer Tracy Danielle Robinson, who started with Pac as a production assistant on his Pour Out a Little Liquor video. Tracy Danielle Robinson and her producing partner, Gobi M. Rahimi, had developed a resume of West Coast hip-hop music videos for artists like Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, The Pharcyde, and many for Tupac Shakur as well. In fact, in the months leading up to Pac's death, Rahimi was Tupac's main music video director, getting behind the camera for I Ain't Mad at Ya, Hit 'Em Up, which he didn't get credit for, both versions of How Do You Want It, all 3 versions of Made Niggas, 2 of America's Most Wanted, and All About You. Rahimi has said that it was him who convinced Tracy Danielle Robinson, her husband, his sister, and several other production people to rent a 15-passenger van for Tracy's birthday celebration with Tupac in Las Vegas that was planned for later that night at Suge Knight's Club 662. But after Tupac was shot hours later and confined to a hospital bed, Rahimi proved that it wasn't just all business with Tupac. He was also a loyal friend to the superstar. Along for the ride to Vegas that wild day was Tupac's live-in girlfriend and fiancée, Kidada Jones, daughter of Quincy Jones, the music icon responsible for producing Michael Jackson's album Thriller, and many other art projects. But apparently this trip to Vegas wasn't something that Tupac was excited about making. But at the alleged urging of his manager Suge Knight, Pac goes along with the planned trip anyway. Kidada noticed right away that Pac seemed stressed the morning of September 7th before they traveled to Las Vegas. She assumed it was because it was due to a recent conflict that Tupac was involved in after the MTV Awards. Pac told her that he had promised Suge Knight weeks before that he would attend the Mike Tyson versus Bruce Shelton heavyweight fight in Las Vegas scheduled for later that evening at the MGM Grand. Even though he would rather not go, he didn't want to break his promise to Suge. He said she should come along, but he didn't want her at the fight around the rowdy guys that he'd be hanging around. Instead, she should come to the party that Suge was having afterwards at a club he owned in downtown Las Vegas, Club 662. While Kidada was helping Tupac pack his clothes for Vegas, she reached over for his bulletproof vest that he would normally wear, but Pac told her to leave it behind because it would be too hot to wear. During the drive, they apparently stopped at a gas station where Tupac bought 5 magazines that were all about guns, and they spent much of the drive in silence, with his focusing on the magazines until they pulled up to their hotel, the Luxor, on the Strip. Kidada's reaction to seeing the black pyramid shape of the hotel was, "God, it's so evil." Pac's friend and music video producer Rahimi gave his opinion as to why Pac may not have been too excited to spend time with Death Row on the night of his shooting. He didn't want to. I'm not sure why, but I know that he didn't want to. The last few weeks were very confusing. He was pulling away from Death Row and was done with his contract. He also had sent a letter to David Kenner firing him and letting the Row know that he was done with them. He wasn't wearing his Death Row medallion. It was all Euthanasia, Tupac's new company. I think he was just cutting loose. He had started a production company with me and Tracy and started his own record label. I think it was just him wanting independence. After Tupac had already gone platinum in just around 3 weeks with his first Death Row release, All Eyes on Me, from earlier that year in 1996, it became clear to people close to Tupac that he was already ready to leave the label and wouldn't be renewing his contract, a point that was started by his bodyguard Frank Alexander.
Tupac was ready to leave the record label, and there was a reason for it. So, that reason only his mom and the immediate people within his camp would know what that reason was.
It is worth noting that by the summer of 1996, Tupac was wondering what was up with his Death Row royalties. Even after reaching around $60 million in album sales, not very much money had gone into Pac's pockets. To make matters worse, at the time of Pac's death, Death Row calculated that Tupac Shakur, arguably the biggest rapper that year, owed the label $4.9 million. With the bail money that was previously paid to get Tupac out of prison among those expenses. With Tupac reportedly wanting to sign a new record deal somewhere else once he completed his required 3-album contract, it isn't hard to see how this would rub Suge Knight the wrong way if he was away from Pac's plans. On August 27, 1996, less than 2 weeks before Tupac was killed, he had already fired David Kenner, Tupac's lawyer, who also happened to be a lawyer for Suge Knight and for Death Row. This isn't something new where we've seen artists on record labels have the same lawyer as the record labels. The fact that Kenner was representing Tupac, his record label, and his manager Suge makes it easy to see how this was a conflict of interest for Tupac. Alex Roberts, former head of business affairs at Death Row Records, clarified what he knew about Tupac wanting to leave Death Row and start his own label in an interview with LA Magazine. The rumors of Pac leaving Death Row were true. He wanted to marry Quincy Jones' daughter. Quincy said to Pac, "Are you going to be able to get out clean without any trouble? You think you'll be okay?" I told Pac, "I know Suge's been good to you, but by the same token, do you have anything in your name? Do you know how much money you have made?" Pac started thinking about it. He had all the watches, the gold jewelry, drove wherever he wanted, but nothing was in his name. I was really close to Suge, and I'd brought it up before. He'd go, "Alex, I'm doing it because they're going to take that money, whether it's $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000, get it on a Friday, and we wouldn't see them for a week. And then they'd be calling saying, 'Hey, I'm in Vegas and I'm broke.' We owned a car dealership, West Coast Exotics, because everybody we were signing, we were giving cars to." Suge said, "Never, ever register the title in their names." Now let's bring it back to the day of Tupac's shooting. Around 3 p.m. on September 7, 1996, Tupac Shakur arrived in Las Vegas, where he was scheduled to watch a boxing match between his personal friend Mike Tyson and Bruce Shelton, who held the WBA heavyweight title for that year. Also, he was scheduled to perform at Suge Knight's Club 662 in Vegas afterwards, a performance that would never end up happening due to his shooting. Tupac insisted that his girlfriend Kidada, who he had considered having children with, and cousin Jamala stay behind in their hotel room for their safety, and he hit the casino table with his bodyguard Frank Alexander and Pac's crew, the Outlaws Immortals, where he was winning big at the crap table. Fast forward to 6:15 p.m., and Tupac and his entourage headed out to the Tyson vs. Sheldon fight at the MGM Grand, where Pac was attracting a lot of attention from fans. Boxer Bruce Sheldon would definitely not last very long in the ring with Tyson, who defeated him by a first-round knockout that happened in just 1 minute and 49 seconds. This became one of the shortest heavyweight championship fights in boxing history. Mike Tyson and Tupac had already become close friends years earlier. In fact, when Tyson met Tupac for the first time at an after-party at a nightclub called the Hollywood Palladium, the boxer had never even heard of the rapper yet. Mike Tyson invited him to come inside the club, with Tupac pulling in 50 other people as well. After entering the club, Pac grabbed a mic and started rapping, earning everyone's respect, including Tyson's, and they had stayed friends ever since. Tupac was so loyal to Mike Tyson that he even visited the heavyweight star when he was incarcerated in an Indiana prison between 1992 and 1995. And Tyson told this story to the Drink Champs podcast, stating, "I had everybody, B.B. King, James Brown, Whitney Houston, Lawrence Henderson, everybody came. I can't even name them all. Just so many people came to visit me. I get a call from somebody. It's Tupac's mother. She explains how she knows me from her son. Explains that I met him at a club one night and that he wants to come and visit me. I said, great, okay. Once he came into the visiting room and there was all these hillbilly hicks, mean mother effing Aryan guys. As soon as he came up, everybody started clapping. They respected him. Soon as he came in the room, they started applauding. After Mike Tyson took down Bruce Sheldon, Tupac was hyped off the fight and celebrated the victory with his crew of friends, entering the lobby of the MGM Grand around 8:35 p.m. that night on September 7, 1996. Suddenly, one of Death Row's associates started whispering in Tupac's ear that he had spotted a man that he claimed had robbed him several weeks earlier. This identified man would be Orlando Anderson, member of the Southside Crips, rivals of the Piru Bloods gang that Suge Knight was affiliated with. Tupac allegedly runs up on Orlando Anderson on site and starts swinging on him, with Pac's entourage jumping in and stomping Orlando out. By 9 p.m., the beatdown had already ended, and Tupac and his crew were heading back to their hotel rooms to change their clothes and get ready to roll out to Suge's club, where Tupac was planning to perform and connect with his music video friends Tracy Robinson and Gobi Rahimi. Tupac goes up to his room to change into a basketball jersey and baggy sweats, retelling the story of his own Tyson blows that had just taken place during the Orlando Anderson beating to his cousin Jamala and fiancé. Pac and his crew were off to the club, but first they made a pit stop at Suge Knight's mansion, which was located up the street from Mike Tyson's mansion, for some pre-game partying where Tupac makes a request of his bodyguard Frank Alexander, who states,
I was walking to the car with Suge and with Tupac, and I was actually opening up the back door to get in the back seat, and Pac stopped and said, no, take the keys and go drive the Lexus with the Outlaws in it, because we're going to be drinking and you're going to be the designated driver to drive us back after we've finished partying over at 662.
It has been said that Pac was telling his bodyguard not to be in the same car with him, and encouraged by Pac's manager Suge Knight himself, who apparently wanted to speak privately with Tupac on the drive over to the club. Interestingly enough, the permits for Tupac's security to carry firearms were allegedly never filed. Suge was waiting for him in the lobby. Suge slid into the driver's seat of his brand new black 1996 BMW 750 sedan, and Tupac was in the passenger's side next to Suge with the windows rolled down. Shortly before getting shot, a photographer took their picture at a red light on the Vegas Strip. Then, shortly after, the moment that would end Tupac's career and his young 25-year-old life took place. A white Cadillac was riding down, and Keefe D says that he saw Tupac hanging outside the window. They rolled up to the right side of Suge's BMW, and they said it looked like Tupac was reaching for a firearm. Shots started flying. Keefe D's statement is that his window is rolled down in the backseat, and the arm of the shooter blasts 13 bullets from a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Glock 22. He says he first saw Suge get shot in the head and thought he was for sure dead. He said that Orlando Anderson was the shooter instead of him because they were on his side of the back passenger seats. Otherwise, he would have been the shooter. The time was 11:15 p.m., and he debunked the claims that Suge used Tupac as a shield because Suge took the first bullet wound and was severely injured with that graze to the head. Tupac's bodyguard, Frank Alexander, was driving the Lexus behind Suge and Pac and detailed the violent event that unfolded. Once we got to the Flamingo, we made a right-hand turn. We came to a stoplight, which was Koval. As it got closer to the BMW, the arm came out and the gun just started firing. After the Cadillac shot into the car, I thought they were dead. My reaction was to run up to the car and stay until the car took off. I didn't know what to think. It was a fog. It was a haze. Were these real bullets? Did they really shoot these guys? Tupac was struck 4 times, with Suge only getting grazed by a bullet. Alton McDonald, also known as Bounty, one of Suge Knight's very close associates, also had his black Toyota Supra shot at, according to Suge Knight's head of security, Reggie Wright Jr. He would not only return shots at the white Cadillac, but also chase it down. Pac was hit twice in the chest, once in the thigh, and once in the arm. One of the bullets punctured Tupac's right lung, and he was rushed to University Medical Center to undergo 2 emergency operations. His entire right lung had to be removed just to prevent internal bleeding. Pac was placed into a medically induced coma. Unfortunately, after 6 days in the hospital bed, this would be a coma that Tupac would never wake up from again. Over at Club 662, the word was starting to spread around about Pac getting shot and being taken to the medical center. Tracy Robinson and Gobi Rahimi would be told about Pac's bloody fate by death row artist Nate Dogg in the club. Rahimi detailed just how dangerous the hospital felt when he was standing by Tupac's side from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. during the 6 days during Pac's failed recovery. It was the scariest 6 nights of my life. There were undercover FBI agents, the police weren't helping, and I got one of the death threats. The marketing director came up to me on the 3rd day and said, "They called the row. They're going to come to finish him off." Then he walked away. So I called Vegas PD and said, "Send the troops. They're going to come finish Tupac off." The lady came back on the phone and said, "Sir, we're a little understaffed right now. So if anything should happen, go get the foot patrol in the hospital." Immediately, I was like, something's a little off here. I remember that earlier that day, we had a press conference. So I called all the local news stations and said, every hour there will be a news conference. And I thought, at least there will be people here with cameras if stuff were to go down. It was just chaos and no support. We didn't trust death row. We didn't trust anyone. After all that happened, there was a Southern old security guard in the corner, and he started chuckling and was like, "Son, I've got to tell you, last year there was a white rodeo star who broke his leg, and the Vegas Police Department gave him 4 policemen and 6 wagons for his family and friends to be comfortable." I thought, isn't that a hoe that the #1 rapper in the world can be laid up in the hospital and can't get any sort of security? Part of that is indicative to all the racial divide in this country that's still going on today. During Pac's medically induced in coma, his head was said to have been swollen to twice its normal size, eyes filled with mucus, gauze placed over his wounds, and a finger on one of his hands was missing. Kidada Jones lost her fiancé and wrote about this painful moment in her father Quincy Jones's book, Q, the autobiography of Quincy Jones. Tupac was the love of my life. He and I lived together for 4 months, and then he was murdered in Las Vegas in 1996. It was the most horrible thing that ever happened to me. I knew we should have never gone to Vegas that night. I had a horrible feeling about it. I've gone over it in my mind a million times. It wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't supposed to be there. It was the worst possible thing that could have happened. I still, to this day, don't know who shot him. I wasn't able to say goodbye. It's not something that should happen to anyone. Who killed Tupac remains anyone's guess. Over the years, the suspects have included East Coast rappers Notorious B.I.G. and P. Diddy, the owner of Bad Boy Records, that Pac and Suge had been feuding with, Orlando Anderson and his Crip set, Suge's enemies, Suge's friends, and hell, some conspiracy theorists even say Suge himself. In fact, Suge Knight refused to cooperate with the investigation, stating at the time, "I don't get paid to solve homicides." Ultimately, it all ended with the cremation of Tupac Shakur's body and the ashes given to his mother, Afeni Shakur. Throughout Tupac's large catalog of music, the theme of getting killed, life and death, and dying young came up over and over again in his lyrics. Unfortunately, these visions of his future came true and happened far too soon. This is fake. She lied. If this is real, then she deserved it. Those were the words echoed throughout the internet when the news broke of Kim Kardashian's robbery. Just by saying aloud or reading that first and last name, you know that the story's going to be huge. Kim Kardashian was a well-known reality star, actress, producer, well-known around the globe, and the percentage of people who didn't know anything about her was relatively tiny. While she definitely is known for her looks, which might be extra for some, her lavish lifestyle is the subject of many articles, talks, and gossip all over the internet. Surely, the public likes and sometimes even provokes famous people to show off their gold and wealth. The crowd is immensely interested in how to live for those who don't need to count the money they're spending. But some celebs take showing off to a different level, as Kim Kardashian does, when it's so lush and extra that a few might get the wrong vibe from it. Then it's rather an unfortunate coincidence that after triggering the public for so long with wealth, dates with A-list celebrities, flying in private jets, and buying the fanciest of designer Balmain or Balenciaga, someone from the crowd had to put a stop to it. So what did it cost Kim Kardashian, and how did it exactly happen? Kim and Kourtney Kardashian, along with stylist Simone Harouche, were coming back from Paris Fashion Week to their hotel, Hotel de Portal, which is also known as No Address Hotel. While Kim's sister wanted a night out, Kim had enough for one day and preferred to stay in her room and work for a bit on the laptop. The family bodyguard, Pascal Duvier, escorted her sister and stylist to keep an eye out and felt that there was no necessity to stay with Kim at the hotel. While working on her computer, somewhere around 2:56 a.m., Kim heard a strange noise that came from the door that startled her.
Right as I was about to fall asleep, I heard guys running up the stairs. They wanted my ring and my jewelry, so I didn't fight back. I just gave them everything, and they tied me up. They wrapped duct tape over my eyes and my mouth. It was the scariest thing I've ever been through in my entire life, just thinking that, you're about to die.
She immediately called out for her bodyguard, but instead, she noticed that 3 strangers were near her door, one of them being tied up. The men looked like they were from the police, despite the fact that they had their faces covered like robbers always do, wearing balaclavas and ski masks. The tied man was recognized later as a porter from the lobby of the hotel, who was forced to give up the location of Kim's room. As soon as the door was opened by the concierge, the robbers marched into the apartment, pulled Kim from the bed, and waved a gun right into her face, demanding to give everything that she's got. They were asking for cash.
But they brought in the concierge from downstairs, handcuffed, with a gun up to him. So they were yelling at me in French.
Kim felt like she was in grave danger and shouted, "Don't kill me, I have babies. Don't kill me, please. I have babies. I'm a mom. Take whatever you want." As the concierge was in the same circumstances as Kim and believed that today might as well be his last day, he didn't have another option but to be a translator and negotiator. So despite having the gun pointed at his neck at the time, he tried to calm Kim down, trying to assure her that they wouldn't die that night. Then the robbers were shouting for some money, but Kim had about $1,000 in euros, which clearly wasn't enough. Kim had a strong belief that the thieves were looking for the ring that she had flashed on her Instagram page, a 20-carat diamond ring. But when she passed the ring to one of the thieves, they didn't go out of her apartment, to her disappointment, but placed the ring in one of the thief's pockets. As Kim was panicking, she was screaming continuously and couldn't keep her cool. So the robbers tied her up with plastic cables, gagged her with duct tape, also put some duct tape on her eyes, and placed her in the bathroom on the floor. They grabbed me and took me into the hallway. I was wearing a bathrobe, naked underneath. Then we went in the room again and they pushed me on the bed. And it was this time they tied me up with plastic cables and taped my hands. Then they put tape over my mouth and my legs. Luckily for Kim, her phone lit up and the name of Pascal Duvier was visible on the screen. When the concierge noticed that, he informed the robbers that if Kim didn't answer this call right away, in no time, the police would probably be there. The heist was stopped and the robbers were on their way, not only with the said ring, but a jewelry box that had 12 more items inside. An overall estimate of $10 million, possibly more. 2 diamond Cartier bracelets, a gold and diamond Jacob necklace, Lorraine Schwartz diamond earrings, a gold Rolex, and other items. I think they robbed me of $5 million. As soon as the robbers got out of the apartment, Kim found some strength to get rid of the restraints, and she found the apartment of her stylist Simone, who wasn't asleep from the moment she heard the first signs of commotion and had locked herself in the bathroom and called Pascal. Just a few minutes after the robbers left the building, the police arrived and canvassed the scene. The following morning, after giving all the necessary statements, Kim was finally able to leave the country and have peaceful surroundings to lick her wounds. First and foremost, this robbery required detailed planning. Despite there being many speculations on the internet about whether the robbers were masked as paparazzi or in the crowd as regular observers, all that they needed was a modern phone with social networking apps on it. Kim Kardashian was known for thoroughly documenting her every move via social networks, which gave a solid ground for thieves to plan their heist. I saw one of her shows where she threw her diamond in the pool, in that episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I thought, she's got a lot of money. This lady doesn't care at all. I went on the internet and I saw her jewelry, I saw her ring, I saw that she showed it everywhere. We knew this information through social media. We knew that she was coming for Fashion Week. So we went there to do some reconnaissance. So we were sure. The thieves were all from Paris with the knowledge of how to move through the city without being caught by security cameras. And they used bikes as their means of transportation. Some of them got to the hotel on foot. The hotel is in the center of Paris, where there are a lot of CCTV cameras. But on a bike, you can ride the small streets, where there are no cameras. Also, bikes are almost impossible to trace. The majority of them look alike, but by using basic means of masking, one can easily become undetectable. From 2:18 a.m. to 2:33 a.m., 6 men approached the entrance of the hotel. 3 of them were riding bikes, and 3 more were on foot. All of them had distinctive shirts as police officers wear, balaclavas and gloves, which were not a part of police uniform. The concierge noticed men approaching the glass doors, and as they had police shirts, he let them in, thinking they were from the police. Then the situation quickly changed, and he had been handcuffed and felt the cold barrel of a gun to his neck and back.
So how did you prepare for the crime?
J'étais sur Internet, et c'est vrai, j'ai vu ses bijoux, j'ai vu sa bague, j'ai vu qu'elle montrait un peu partout, et qu'on a su ces informations-là par les réseaux sociaux. Dès qu'on savait qu'elle venait pour la Fashion Week, donc on est venu là, on a venu repérer où était la Fashion Week. Donc on était certains, nous on était là depuis... Voilà, c'est ici.
Is this family and are these girls sharing too much? Like, people now are wondering if that's to blame and how these guys knew that she was in their apartment, probably alone.
So what happened on the night?
Alors ici on est rentré par la petite porte qui était ouverte à l'intérieur de la porte. Dès qu'on est rentré, on a pris possession des lieux. On l'a maîtrisé, on l'a attaché. Et ensuite, on a cherché les clés de quelle chambre elle occupait. Et moi je suis resté en bas, mes 2 collègues sont montés avec le concierge pour aller jusqu'à la chambre de Madame Kardashian. Ensuite ils ont récupéré les bijoux, ils sont redescendus. Et la secrétaire de Madame Kardashian a appelé le secours, mais elle a appelé le 911, c'est écrit aux États-Unis. Ce qui leur a fait perdre beaucoup de temps. Et quand on est sorti, c'était simplement une ronde de police qui n'était pas au courant, ne savait pas qu'il y avait eu le braquage.
Are these Kim Kardashian's robbers? It's the first video showing the alleged thieves on bikes and on foot, heading toward the boutique hotel in Paris where the heist took place.
How did you get caught?
Parce que j'ai laissé mon ADN. Quand j'ai maîtrisé le gardien, je l'ai donc pris les mains et je l'ai attaché. Et en l'attachant, j'ai laissé mon ADN.
As the concierge recalled, the men didn't seem like professionals at all. They seemed to be between 40 and 50, and there was some confusion and improvisation happening during the heist. Because of who Kim Kardashian was and the fact that the jewelry was very pricey, this robbery was handled by the elite Paris crime unit BRB, which has a specialty in dealing with organized crime and armed robberies. The chief of that division was Madame Commissioner Agnes Zanardi, who was experienced in dealing with jewelry robberies, especially smash and grab ones. After some time had passed, French police arrested about 17 suspects, from whom only 10 were indicted and were facing charges. Younes Abbas, 63 years old, was charged with conspiracy, robbery, forcible confinement, and kidnapping. He was released from prison due to health issues, and he published a book, I Sequestered Kim Kardashian, in which he mocks Kim Kardashian and makes fun of her on account of not knowing the analog of 911 in France and several other things. Flores H. had the same charges as Eunice Abess. Another robber, a 64-year-old man, had been charged with conspiracy and helping to resell stolen jewels. The fourth one, 27-year-old Gary M., is known to be the brother of the chauffeur that was with Kim in Paris and was charged with assisting in armed robbery and kidnapping. 6 more suspects were much older, ages from 44 to 72 years old, and happened to be 5 men and 1 woman. One of them was Omar Eitredesh, who's thought to be the genius mastermind behind the whole heist. He was the person who tied and restrained Kim, and he left his DNA on the duct tape and plastic cables. While in prison, he wrote a letter to Kim Kardashian in 2017. After observing your emotion and realizing the psychological damages I inflicted, I decided to write to you. Not to obtain from you some sort of indulgence, know that I fully sympathize with the pain you're enduring, your children, your husband, and your close ones. I hope that this letter will allow you to forget little by little the trauma that you suffered by my fault. The question that a lot of people had at the forefront of their mind is whether there was a sign of remorse from the robbers. Not really. Majority of the robbers showed no remorse at all. What's more, they said that actually it was Kim's fault that the robbery happened because she needed to be more modest and not show off her jewels and lush lifestyle to those who can't afford that. They should be a little less showy toward people who can't afford it. For some people, it's provocative. The jewels were likely to be taken apart and sold separately on the black market. Diamonds like that change hands 5 times in 2 days in Antwerp's diamond district. Nobody will ever know. They'll be on the fingers of Americans within 6 months to a year. You have 3 choices. You could either hold on to it, you can sell it to a buyer who's fine with it being stolen, which is very hard to find, or you can change the stones to make them unrecognizable. Anybody in the trade would be able to tell that these were Kim Kardashian's diamonds. As expected, the whole family was immensely worried about Kim's well-being, specifically her husband at the time, Kanye West, now known as Ye, who stated that he didn't care about lost jewelry at all, only that Kim was unharmed. And as soon as she landed in New York, she and her mother were escorted to their Manhattan apartment, followed by an excessive security detail. As soon as Kim was safe in New York with her family, she tried to keep everything normal as much as she could and kept herself away from any appearance on social media for 3 months. Also, her close friends such as Jonathan Shaban, Simon Huck, and Lala Anthony came to show her some support. The events that Kim had experienced had a traumatic effect on her, which is quite understandable, and resulted in her having anxiety attacks and sleep deprivation. As a matter of fact, what happened to her in Paris forced Kim to rethink the way that she behaves and what she posts on social media. She told her mom, "I think it's time that I have to see a therapist, because I don't want to have these feelings and flashbacks. I've always been really aware of my emotions and how I've been feeling, and I never really thought therapy was right for me. But I also want to be responsible to my husband and kids and do whatever I have to do to get through this and not be this crazy person that's always scared and anxious. I don't want to live my life like that."
I know this sounds crazy, but I know that was meant to happen to me. And I don't want to start crying, but I feel like that was so meant to happen to me. I'm such a different person.
When she felt comfortable again to be around flashes of cameras and people staring at her, everyone could see the drastic changes in her appearance. There was no flashy, luxurious jewelry or extravagant outfits. On the contrary, minimalism, while still expensive, seemed to be a new credo for Kim. No expensive items ever come to my house. I have it all taken from security before I even enter my home. I can't sleep if I have jewelry in my safe, or money, or anything at my house. I just don't live my life like that. As far as jewelry, if I'm wearing something, it's borrowed, it's fake. Well, after such details are revealed about the theft, you may expect people to perhaps feel sorry for Kim, sympathize with her, or show some support. While some definitely did so, for example, Salma Hayek said, "It's horrific. I know it's terrible, but thank God she's okay. It's the only thing I can say because it could have been worse. And it is good news. Thank God that her little girl was not there." And many others showed Kim's support via Twitter. But There is another story of people who thought that the whole Paris situation was nothing more than a publicity stunt. There were a lot of really mean tweets, the general message of which was that Kim should find another way to attract attention to herself. Some even suggested that it was another conspiracy theory because it's close to being almost impossible to differentiate between publicity stunts and everything else that happens in the Kardashians' lives. Karl Lagerfeld, who was a creative director at Chanel and a designer, kind of accused Kim of having that lush lifestyle and being a living provocation. If you're that famous, and you put all your jewelry on the net, you go to hotels where nobody can come near to the room, you cannot display your wealth and then be surprised that some people want to share it with you. Some people interpreted this as Kim Kardashian, even herself, getting a special sign from above that she should change her ways around this flashy and luxurious lifestyle she was living and showing off via social media, which, in fact, she did. I try to share my life. I definitely love doing that, but I think I'm a little bit more cautious these days about what I do share. I think it's so important to monitor social media usage. It's about boundaries. At home, I don't have my phone. Dinner time, breakfast time, there's no phone. I might take a photo, save it, post it when I leave the place or when I'm in a different location, because I don't think that worked out for me so well when I was posting every last detail. I've learned from experience. Shakira, the superstar singer of Hips Don't Lie, is facing 8 years of jail time for a tax evasion scandal issued by Spain's treasury. It all started in 2012 when Shakira bought a home in Barcelona that later was her and her partner's Gerard Piqué, residents alongside their 2 kids. Gerard is a Spanish citizen, and it's quite possible that people from the Spanish treasury laid their eyes on the celebrity pair from that time. While having a relationship with Gerard, Shakira did not reside in Spain more than 183 days of the year and spent more than 7 months traveling and promoting her albums all around the world. Her residence at the time was in the Bahamas, and all income that she required from her tours was outside of Spain. Then, 3 years later in 2015, it said that Shakira declared that her home in Barcelona was her place of residency, and she enrolled her son in the school there. Spanish domestic law has 3 criteria upon which it's decided whether a person is a resident and has to pay taxes or not: physical presence in the country for more than 183 days, or sporadic presence, a center of economic interest, and having a spouse and or children in Spain. As a professor of tax law, Adolfo Martin Jimenez stated, even if you are not present for that many days, a sporadic presence is regarded as presence. There's a tendency in Spain, within the tax administration, to consider if a person is not able to prove that they are a resident in another country, then there's a presumption that they are doing something strange. As Shakira is known to be very transparent and abide by the law, specifically in terms of tax paying, she paid 17.2 million euros as a resident. In 2018, though, the Spanish government blamed Shakira for not being able to pay 14.5 million euros in taxes from the income she earned from 2012 to 2014, which is strange because Shakira stated that she was not a resident of Spain at the time. Moreover, her residence, as is stated on the papers, was in the Bahamas. Spanish prosecutors stated in July of 2022 that there is an 8-year prison term and a 23 million euro fine waiting for Shakira. The sum of the fine is based on the artist's estimated income. The fact that Shakira is an owner of 3 offshore companies is open to the public eye thanks to the leak of secret financial records that were acquired by the German newspaper SZ. And that leak was the subject of an investigation in 2017 by Paradise Papers, which is owned by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism and its media partners. By having offshore companies, Shakira, alongside other celebrities, considerably lowered their taxes. Shakira and her lawyers state that the reason why she uses these companies is that the bigger part of her income comes from outside Spain. Her 3rd offshore company is located in the British Virgin Islands and was created somewhere between the last months of 2018 and the beginning of 2019. Shakira herself is the director and sole beneficiary of said company, and the vice president and secretary of that company is her mother, Nidia Ripoll, who lives and resides in Barranquilla, Colombia. Moreover, the company was founded on $50,000, and the place of accounting records is the home in Barcelona. The main shareholder in this company is New World Holdings, another company that Shakira is connected to. What's more is that there's a mashup of when exactly this and other companies were created, because lawyers stated that offshore companies were created somewhere between 2001 and 2009, while on papers it's stated between 2018 and 2019. Shakira is saying that she's innocent of all accusations that the Spanish government and Treasury accused her of. Also, she adds that one of the main reasons why she has these accusations is because she was dating a Spanish citizen. Shakira states that she'll continue to fight these false accusations. I didn't spend 183 days per year in Spain at that time at all. I was busy fulfilling my professional commitments around the world. Second, I've paid everything they claimed I owed, even before they filed a lawsuit. So as of today, I owe zero to them. It's just their style. But I'm confident that I have enough proof to support my case and that justice will prevail in my favor. In addition, Shakira states that while being under investigation, the Spanish Treasury used unorthodox methods such as gathering data from hospitals and other public places to make their case stronger and force her into a settlement agreement. It's unacceptable that, in its accusation, the tax authorities are not respecting the legal certainty that must be guaranteed to any taxpayer, not my fundamental rights. As well as that, they're trying to damage a reputation earned over many years. In my case, they have violated my right to privacy and the presumption of innocence, basic rights of any citizen. So Shakira stated that she would not make any deals whatsoever and would face a trial if it came to that. In May, she lost an appeal, and in June, she rejected the settlement deal. However, even without evidence to support these fictional claims, as they usually do, they've resorted to a salacious press campaign to try to sway people. They apply pressure in the media along with the threat of reputational damage in order to coerce settlement agreements. Spanish tax authorities do this often to both celebrities and unjustly to the regular taxpayer. Her representative stated, Shakira has always cooperated and abided by the law, demonstrating impeccable conduct as an individual and a taxpayer and faithfully following the counsel of PricewaterhouseCoopers, a prestigious and globally recognized tax firm. Unfortunately, the Spanish tax office, which loses 1 out of every 2 lawsuits with its taxpayers, continues to violate her rights and pursue yet another baseless case. Shakira is confident that her innocence will be proven by the end of the judicial process. In addition, Shakira made a few hints that she was not the only one who was subject to tax evasion cases taking advantage. Still, the Spanish government is known for making accusations against other celebrities, including famous footballers. Footballers are paid not only for their success on the field, but a more significant part of their income is from the usage of the players' images, which include their voice, names, and photographs in marketing campaigns all over the world. Under Spanish law, image rights income is taxed at 20% or so, while the income is taxed at about 43%. But the number can vary in accordance with different regions. Although footballers can play for Spanish clubs on Spanish soil, the fact that their image is used widely around the globe draws attention to the law. Also, when said images or image rights are being sold through offshore companies and passed over to the Spanish government and treasury, incidents start to emerge. On the same matter, Anna Simmons, who's a co-author of the book Sports Agents and Labor Markets, explained, lots of agents are likely to advise their players in the most cost-efficient ways of paying taxes, but there's a fine line between tax efficiency and tax avoidance. In many cases, players and agents probably don't know that they're doing anything wrong. But while ignorance is bliss, incompetence isn't a defense. Rules in this area have been a bit opaque in the past and can be open to interpretation. There's been debate around what an image right actually is, and concern that it's just a way of avoiding paying taxes. Typically, a club licenses a player's image rights from their company. The company then pays tax where it's registered. If it's in a low-tax area, that makes for a significant saving. Cristiano Ronaldo is another victim of the Spanish Treasury for tax evasion. The Spanish government accused him of channeling funds through a few shell companies that are located in the British Virgin Islands and other places while he was playing for Real Madrid between 2010 and 2014. The authorities stated that the total sum that Ronaldo earned through the said period was about 15 million euros. When Ronaldo appeared in court for the first time, he denied doing anything wrong and suggested that he was accused because he was a celebrity. If I weren't called Cristiano Ronaldo, I wouldn't be here. In addition, following the allegations from the Spanish government side, prosecutors stated voluntary and conscious breach of his fiscal obligations to Spain. In contrast, Ronaldo's lawyers stated that the allegations were nothing more than a mix-up of the requirements in Spanish law and that there was no way it was an attempt to evade paying taxes. In a 4-year time, Ronaldo pleaded guilty to tax evasion and accepted a prison sentence of 2 years alongside paying a 19 million euro fine, which includes 3.2 million euros for defrauding Spain and 5.7 million euros in taxes. Interestingly enough, under Spanish law, if a person who's accused of tax evasion the first time doesn't have to serve in prison if their sentence is 2 years or less. Messi and his father were accused of channeling money through shell companies based in Belize and Uruguay to hide the income that was obtained through selling his image rights between 2007 and 2009. The said income includes endorsement deals with Banco Sabadell, Danone, Adidas, Pepsi Cola, Procter & Gamble, and the Kuwait Food Company. While the said companies had been assigned full image rights, in return, Messi received no more than $500,000. But the Spanish court concluded that the received sum was way bigger and was actually in the realm of 10.1 million euros. It stated that Messi had no idea how his father was managing his finances. All I knew was that we signed agreements with certain sponsors for X amount of money and that I had to do adverts, photos, and those things. But about the money and where it went, I knew nothing. I was playing football. I had no idea about anything. I trusted my dad and my lawyers. Messi and his father had been charged with 3 counts of tax fraud and were looking at 22.5 months of jail time if they were found guilty, in additional fines that were equal to the sum that the Spanish government was supposedly ripped off. Both Messi and his father paid 5 million euros, which was the same amount as unpaid taxes and interest. Messi and his father were found guilty but got a reduced sentence since they paid a defrauded amount to Spain's tax authority. The court statement declared that Messi unequivocally understood his obligation to pay tax on income obtained from exploiting his image rights. Therefore, it is not logical that he should ignore his duty to pay tax on them. Other football players were accused by the Spanish government of tax evasion, such as Jose Mourinho, Marcelo, Luka Modric, and Alexis Sanchez. Not only football players, but tons of famous people had precedents and were accused of tax evasion for several decades by the Spanish government. The first ever tax evasion case against a high-profile person was Lola Flores, or Lola de España, who was a famous flamenco singer and dancer. She failed to pay taxes between 1982 and 85, and the prosecutors stated that she had to serve 2.5 years in prison and pay the fine of 312,000 euros. There was an opera singer, Montserrat Caballé, who earned and supposedly hid 2 million euros in the 2009-2010 tax year through a shell company in Andorra and had to pay back more than 500,000 euros in tax. The list continues with tennis player Rafael Nadal, opera singer Alfredo Kraus, celebrity chef Sergi Arola, and model Judith Moscow, and many, many others. It's a recurring thing for the Spanish authorities to target these individuals to try and make an example out of them, which amounts to nothing more than what seems like a shakedown in order to get a sum of money out of them, and that's what Shakira's team is alleging. Tax authorities target footballers as high-profile subjects for a prosecution to show that no one is above their reach and that they're serious about cracking down on tax schemes, states Tessa Lorimer, a tax disputes lawyer at Withers Worldwide. While the same can be said about famous singers and other media people, hopefully Shakira will be able to hold her ground and fight through these accusations and win, setting a new precedent for famous people and athletes that have been targeted by the Spanish government. In November 2000, the TV show America's Most Wanted made an urgent plea for the whereabouts of a man on the run for murder. 8 years earlier, the same person had appeared on MTV as one of New York's up-and-coming rappers. Shy Ali was perfectly placed to become a rapper. As a teenager in the late 80s, early hip-hop pioneers like Queen Latifah and EPMD would be in his neighborhood in Co-op City in the Bronx. At a young age, he also made friends with Chris Lighty, who alongside Mona Scott Young created Violator Records. Lighty became like an older brother to him and would take him outside of Co-op City and let him see other parts of New York, and sometimes even let him in the studio. That was quite an important contact to have in hip-hop, to say the least. Chris was part of a loose collective known as Native Tongues. This group had members such as the Jungle Brothers, Tribe Called Quest, Black Sheep, and De La Soul, and genuinely focused on positive hip-hop. Lighty was the road manager for the Jungle Brothers, but one of them had their flight canceled from London to New York and wouldn't be able to make their upcoming show at the Apollo. So Shy Ali brazenly asked if he could freestyle and take his place. It was a bold move, and Shy Ali had to pretend that he wasn't scared to death of going up on stage. But he managed to pull this off, and Chris decided to sign him to Violator Records. Despite only being 12 years of age, Shy Ali appeared on Black Sheep's song Past the 40. At just 15 years old, he released his debut album, The Fabulous Shy Ali. The LP contained features that other rappers could really only dream about, such as De La Soul and Phife Dawg. The album did reasonably well, and he had accomplished more than most people at the age of just 15. Chris soon left the label, but Shy Ali was left on there, and it was clear that bigger and brighter things were on the horizon. But Chris's departure had its downsides. The label mostly focused on alternative rock, and Chris was their hip-hop guy. Meanwhile, Shy Ali's father was his manager and tried to negotiate a better contract for his son, and these financial issues escalated into legal disputes. One thing led to another, where Shy Ali had a second album, but for contractual reasons this album never got released. He was in limbo, where he simply wasn't able to release new music. The years passed and Shy Ali's rap career was starting to lose steam. The typical career progression, if you can call it that, is to go from drug dealing to rapping during this time. Shy Ali is one of the few rappers that went the other way. A lot of his friends were making good money hustling, and this was a way for him to make some extra money, although a lot of the time he was simply hanging out with drug dealers during their work shifts. Shy Ali got no formal notification that he was dropped from the label, but he just assumed that he was no longer wanted. And given the lifestyle he now led, he felt that it was sensible to own a gun. If he had to visit a neighborhood he wasn't too familiar with, or was in any situations where he felt he might be in danger, he would bring it with him for protection. But this form of protection ironically got him into harm's way. He was stopped by the police, and when they found the gun, he was put on probation. Right towards the end of his probation, he started carrying a gun again, and he got pulled over again and was re-given probation. During this time, he had a young daughter with his girlfriend Vicky. He was now under house arrest, so it seemed sensible to live with his daughter and girlfriend. And during this time, stuck at home, Vicky got pregnant again. With 4 people in the family, they needed a bigger place to live. And as luck would have it, Vicky's mother had an apartment she was no longer using. It was previously occupied by Vicky's brother Sean, who was currently in jail. And for a while, it was a nice and happy home. A year later, Sean was freed from prison. He came back to find his previous home was now occupied by a family of 4. He lived with them, but was now sleeping on the couch. There was unspoken tension in the air between Sean and Shy Ali. Firstly, Shy Ali was now living in his home, and naturally, living in a cramped house often causes arguments. Shy Ali would regularly provide him with some weed or coke, and Sean would often never pay him back for it. To keep the place a happy home, Shy Ali would often bite his tongue and not confront him about it. But there was tension bubbling up to the surface, and rather than straightening this out, Shy Ali moved to Harlem. While living there, Shy Ali would get a phone call that would change his life forever. Shy Ali received a call from Vicky and she was crying. Ali recalls that the issue was about buying milk and groceries for the kids. With Vicky crying, Ali asked to speak to Sean, but when he got on the phone, Sean was rather dismissive and said something along the lines of, "What do you care? You don't even live here." Ali didn't want to travel over from Harlem to pay for the milk and groceries, so just told Sean to give Vicky the money that he owes him. Sean replied and said that he doesn't owe him anything. They had a little back and forth on the phone, and the tension which was stirring between them was finally unleashed. They threw some words back and forth until eventually Sean tells Shy Ali the infamous words of, "Go SMD." Shy Ali drives out to the apartment full of rage, with his homie next to him. And of course, he was in an unpredictable situation, so he brought his gun with him. He reaches their home, but Sean is nowhere to be seen. To his disgust, the apartment his children are living in is pretty much in shambles. This dialed the rage he was feeling up another few notches. He drives over to a spot where Sean would normally hang out. He sees Sean and calls him. Ali pulls a gun upon him to scare Sean, but this has no effect on him whatsoever. Sean acts like he doesn't even care that he has a gun on him, perhaps even taunts him, so Shy proves that he isn't bluffing and pulls the trigger. He shoots the brother of his girlfriend and uncle of his children several times. After unleashing his rage, Shy Ali only had one thing on his mind. He needed to get the hell out of there, and fast. Shy Ali drove away from the scene and got rid of the gun. Later that night, he got a call on his cell phone explaining to him that Sean had died. The one thought in his head when he heard this was, I gotta go. He had a trusted friend in Atlanta, so he took a long journey out from New York. Thankfully for him, Vicky lied to the police and didn't mention that Shy Ali and Sean were arguing. Shy Ali stepped foot inside a house in Atlanta and wouldn't leave this house for another 6 months. During this time, he would also allow his hair to grow and stop shaving. He eventually grew braids and gave himself more of a Rastafarian look, which was far removed from what he looked like before. Ali was living out of his friend's pocket, so at some stage, he needed to start earning a living. But he couldn't exactly pop into a Walmart with a resume, and there was no way that he could earn an honest living from here on out. And even hustling was still out of bounds. He wasn't in a position where he could hang around a street corner. And if the police caught him with even a small bit of weed, they might want to get some fingerprints. So he would sell drugs here and there, but a lot of his money came from robberies. He was already wanted for homicide, so he felt that 1 or 2 robberies wouldn't leave him in any worse of a situation. After a while, he felt like it was time for him to move out of his hideout in Atlanta. So to get a new place of his own, he needed to fake an identity. He learned about a nurse at a nearby hospital who had access to birth certificates they filled out when babies were born. They were essentially blank birth certificates that were certified by the hospital. She would secretly sell them to people who, for whatever reason, wanted to create their own birth certificate. And one of Shy Ali's friends gave him one of his kids' social security numbers. With this information, he could rent an apartment. And he now had an address, so he could get a driver's license and credit cards. He even bought his own gun legally through using all of these forged documents. He was a wanted killer on the loose, but found himself at a gun store, being told that he could buy as many guns as he pleased. He had been a wanted man in New York since January, but in November that year, he appeared on America's Most Wanted. His face was all over national television. There was not a single state where he would be safe now. He decided that he can't just stay in the same spot anymore, and continued moving around. But he started to get homesick for New York. Shy Ali began feeling fatigued from all of this hiding, considered going to Cuba, and perhaps a part of him even wanted to get caught. Whatever the reason, he kept coming back to New York, and in February 2001, America's Most Wanted aired him again. He was paranoid of every which way he went. Then one night he was staying in Parkchester. The moment he had anticipated for over a year was suddenly sprung upon him. At 5 a.m., he heard loud banging on the door. This was in a high-rise apartment. He looked out the window and realized it was far too high to jump. The jig was finally up. Shy Ali served an 11-year sentence at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York. His sentence, as you can imagine, gave him time to think. He simply got on with his life while living in prison. He got married to another woman while behind bars, and she actually gave birth while he was behind bars due to the conjugal visits he was allowed to have while inside. In 2012, he was a free man once again. And while his run from the law makes a good story, there are real people whose lives had been ruined and altered forever from this ordeal. Sean had a son who was only 11 or 12 when the killing happened and has had to grow up without a father. Shy Ali has a restraining order where he's not allowed to be in contact with him, but says he's incredibly apologetic and wants to pay him back in whatever way he can. And there's a wider issue at hand that he wants to address. Shy Ali wanted to get the word out that he's ashamed of what happened and wanted to be more of a positive role model going forward. He made a stupid lapse of judgment and doesn't want young men making the same mistakes. In an interview with Vlad TV, he talks about how young black men have anger issues and this needs to be addressed to stop history from repeating itself. He says, "We got issues. We have anger issues. We got pride issues. We got patience issues. And if it's not addressed, we take it out on each other. I don't understand why. I don't know why we take it out on each other all the time. Like, it's sickening and sad. This seems to be more of a problem that's getting increasingly dangerous for young men in general as a whole, considering how many killings and shootings we've seen, at least in the United States, for people that are underage. But it's definitely a conversation worth having, if anything is to ever change, which doesn't seem likely in the near future. The topic of snitching, telling, whatever you want to call it, is at the forefront of hip-hop right now. But it reminded me of an event 2 decades ago. In 2001, Lil' Kim found herself caught in a shootout in Manhattan, with 20 bullets flying from both sides. The shootout was brought to court, and Lil' Kim was asked to testify under oath and could end up in prison if she failed to tell the truth. But while facing a federal grand jury, something crazy happened. One of the most legendary beefs in hip-hop was between Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown, both of which even went to the same high school together. The tension primarily came from their membership of 2 rival groups. Lil' Kim was with Junior Mafia, whereas Foxy Brown was with The Firm. In February of 2001, Lil' Kim did an interview with Hot 97. She was leaving the building and was accompanied by her manager D-Rock and her bodyguard. The doors of Hot 97 regularly have famous rappers crossing paths, and Lil' Kim found herself walking past Capone and Nori, both of which were affiliated with Foxy Brown. They had a song called Bang Bang, which featured Foxy taking shots at Lil' Kim. A back and forth of words were exchanged, but this sadly escalated into a shootout. One man in Capone and Nori's entourage was wounded, but thankfully that was the height of it. The police arrived, and Lil' Kim's manager and her bodyguard were taken to court for weapons charges, and Kim was taken to the stand as a witness. She was, after all, on the radio just before this all happened. However, in front of a federal grand jury, she told the courtroom that her bodyguard and manager were not there that night. She had covered for her friends and refused to snitch. This was clearly a risk she was willing to take and suffer the consequences. And hopefully, so long as everyone didn't tell the police anything, she assumed she was safe. But unfortunately for Kim, there was video footage from that night of Lil' Kim's manager opening the door for her, the people that she said she didn't know. Standing beside them was also her bodyguard, who she claimed wasn't with her either. There was indisputable evidence that Kim had committed perjury, or lied in court under oath. She was charged with conspiracy to commit perjury, making false statements, and obstructing justice. The worst case scenario for her now was 20 years behind bars. This behavior was far from the norm, and for Lil' Kim, especially as a woman, it was particularly unbelievable even today. Snitching is something that's traditionally viewed as gang activity, usually the most common being men that are involved in it. So it's a real upfront thing for Lil' Kim to, what some people may consider dumb, but very attuned to her value system, for her to really take one on the chin and not tell on anybody. It's incredibly ironic too that the most manly person around this whole event was a woman. I mean, what is snitching exactly? Not to go into it too much, but usually it refers to someone going to the police to report or tell something on someone that was accompanying them during a crime, and then they sell them out so they don't serve any time or get a reduced sentence. It's more become colloquially known as, hey, this person shouldn't be talking to police because they're involved in gang or street life, and giving them any type of statements that could lead any investigation forward would also be telling. Lil C's, though, was Biggie's hype man and a respected member of Junior Mafia, but when he was testifying in Kim's perjury trial, he had a falling out with Kim. Lil C's told MTV at the time, "Me and Kim wasn't on good terms for the moment, and she made it clear to the world that she didn't want to have anything to do with me and my peoples, so she wasn't trying to call us to her defense. Being that we was witnesses there, the US government subpoenaed us, and there's nothing you can do about that. When you're subpoenaed, you either come or they take your ass to jail. It's just that simple." So Lil C simply told the court what happened and proved that Lil Kim had committed perjury. And Lil C's argued that the same thing could have happened to him if he didn't tell the truth. He said, "These federal people knew everything. They had phone taps. They had the video cameras from the shooting at Hot 97. They had that all on tape. 2 weeks after Lil C's testified and 2 months before Lil Kim was scheduled for her prison sentence, she decided to hit back. She filed a $6 million civil lawsuit against Lil C's for using her image without her permission in an upcoming DVD, The Chronicles of Junior Mafia, Part 2, Reloaded. Without getting Kim's permission, this constituted false advertising and false endorsement. C's had also allegedly tried to stage interviews with other Junior Mafia members about Kim's trial. It was Lil Kim's way of getting back at him and letting him know what she thought of him. Lil C's maintained his position that he's not a snitch and said that Kim should have gone for a plea bargain. This is when, instead of doing a trial in front of the jury, you plead guilty up front and receive a much more lenient sentence. The fact that Lil Kim brought this to a trial too shows that she must have had confidence or delusion in her case and her lawyer, and she probably did have a good lawyer because she only ended up getting 1 year in prison. But perhaps more importantly, she came out of prison with her integrity completely intact. There was nothing anyone could say to throw dirt on her name. Snitching is something that could, or at one point, ruined your rap career and possibly put you in harm's way. But it doesn't seem to be the case anymore with a couple of other people who have been exposed for telling as of late. When we think of a rapper telling, the first person who comes into mind now is Tekashi 6ix9ine. He admitted to the federal government that he was a member of the 9 Trey gang who would rob people at gunpoint, and cooperating with the law, taking the stand, he could basically buy back his entire life. He was initially expecting up to 47 years behind bars, and then managed to cut that down to 2. Yes, it was supposed to affect his safety outside, to which people thought he would go into witness protection, but that wasn't the case. Did it affect his music career? Yes, but he obviously preferred it over 5 decades behind bars, and some people are even bringing up the argument now that perhaps it wasn't the fact that he told that ruined his music career, but the fact that people didn't like him and he told, because that brings a connection to the next individual, which is Gunna. In the eyes of the people, a more debatable example of telling comes from him. Unlike Lil Kim, he went down the plea deal route and has had mixed results. As you probably know, most of the artists on the YSL label have been arrested for RICO charges or racketeering, but Gunna seems to have been given preferential treatment. Being the first one to take a plea, a bunch of people have put 2 and 2 together and believe that he cooperated with law enforcement. Even the video footage is out there. He got 500 hours of community service where he'll talk to kids about the dangers of gang violence, which is clearly way better than being locked up. The video that released of Gunna was him answering questions and telling a judge that he knew that YSL was more than just a music label and a gang that needed to end. Most people consider any form of cooperation with law enforcement as snitching, but Gunna claims that this was not the case. He's saying that through his plea deal route, or the team around him, is that everything Gunna told the court was not testimony, and his statements in this court can't be used as evidence for anything else. So, supposedly, Gunna's response to these questions doesn't affect the trials of other members of YSL, but he is a state's witness, and if they do go to court, he has to get on the stand and tell the truth. Otherwise, he'll face the same fate as Lil Kim. But to put Lil Kim's refusal to tell in a better perspective, let's take an example of another female rapper who was being accused of telling, Megan Thee Stallion. She was driving home from a party with Tory Lanez. At some point, Tory is found guilty of allegedly shooting her in both feet. The police arrived and she said she lied to the police that it wasn't Tory to protect him. However, she was changing her mind through social media, eventually telling people that he did shoot her, and then when she ended up showing to the court case to testify, Megan Thee Stallion seems to draw the line at the same spot that Lil C's does. She was happy to lie to the police on the scene, but on social media and later on in front of a packed courtroom where her word could be held against her, she decided to tell the truth. And this has received mixed responses. A lot of the report for Megan Thee Stallion argues that she's a citizen, which Lil Kim was in the same way. If you're not a part of a criminal gang or not a part of the crime, then the laws of snitching don't apply. This very argument came from Wack 100, who posted a picture on Instagram which read, "Megan Thee Stallion is a civilian. She can't be classified as a snitch. Civilians tell the truth." He interestingly captioned the picture with, "My daughter is raised the same way, #NotGuilty, stop trying to enforce ice hockey rules on a kickball field," which is a fair take from someone who's actually involved in that lifestyle.
But perhaps things are just different now. When Lil' Kim was coming up, she wanted to be seen on the same level and playing field as other men, both creatively, artistically, rapping ability, and being able to hold her own on things outside of the music. There were incredibly few female rappers around when she came up, so she fought long and hard to give female rappers the respect and credit that they get today. So Lil' Kim perhaps didn't see herself as a citizen that was separate from what was happening, and she'd rather lie and potentially risk prison so people didn't think any differently. 16 years from those courtroom dramas though, Lil' Kim and Lil C's met once again, and under better circumstances. They were both celebrating what would have been the 47th birthday of their former close friend, Biggie Smalls. Lil C's apologized to Lil' Kim, and they buried the hatchet. Hip-hop is often defined by beefs and moments of conflict, but this was a beautiful moment of old friends reconnecting, despite her having the right to not accept his apology considering it helped land her in prison. Lil' Kim's place has been firmly cemented in hip-hop history for her contribution to rap and fashion, but she should also go down as the female rapper who never snitched in the face of a lot of time, 20 years, when we have male rappers who claim to be gangsters that are telling. From the children's song and dance of a generation, topping the charts, TV deals, to facing life in prison, Silento, or Ricky Hawk as his classmates knew the 16-year-old, became famous overnight, seemingly. Specifically after one song, Watch Me WhipNae-Nae. The track is an infectious dance song that was created so people could enjoy some easy dance moves and have fun. People will be dancing and smiling all around the world for the next 30 years whenever my song gets played. In 2015, the track quickly became viral and appeared on major listening platforms like iTunes, YouTube, Vine, and SoundCloud. Soon after, the track reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 6 weeks straight. The single for a while was topping iTunes in 15 countries and on the UK's Shazam charts. In fact, Silento got the plaque at a renowned LA Troubadour Club as part of Capitol Records' 3rd annual Capitol Congress event. Moreover, Silento was nominated for the Choice R&B Hip Hop Song category at the Teen Choice Awards, and he made a few appearances on different live TV shows like Good Morning America and Live with Kelly. It wasn't just the dance moves that brought Silento the fame and popularity though. A lot of the thanks goes to the entertainment brand Dance On and the music distribution company TuneCore, which are responsible for the initial buzz around Watch Me. Before the song appeared on Dance On's radars, it reached success on Instagram and Vine, when Camille Moussard, who was head of video at TuneCore, spotted it and brought it to Dance On's attention. It was kind of like putting two ingredients together. One was the dance and the influencers of the dance network, and the other one was a song that everybody was eager to listen to, but they just didn't know about it yet. To create the hit, knowing the moves of the 21st century weren't enough, Silento worked with Bolo the producer. He reached out to him on Instagram, and he spent a couple of weeks making his case to him, as the latter had some reservations about creating the song, but in the end he agreed. For like 2 months he kept trying to tell me, hey, I got this song, it's going to be a hit record, and I thought it was the craziest idea. For a hit record, it has to be the perfect song, perfect beat, perfect timing, perfect everything. Plus, having the dance come from Atlanta, which is a very young, dance-oriented city, there were a lot of groups dancing to it online, and it spawned so many videos on these apps. Moreover, the song gave a push to other artists such as Ayo and Teo to release their songs with a similar vibe, although none of them had the same potential to be the next viral craze. Watch Me was said to have grown on people because of the power of online video platforms, specifically hashtags, Vine, and Instagram video. While still being in school and getting famous, Silento said in an interview, "After Watch Me blew up, the kids who were always disrespectful to me in school began to show respect and say, 'What up?' to me when I would see them in the halls. Fame in high school was a blessing since the music kept me focused on working on my craft as an artist, which is what makes me happy. It was a distraction to any negative energy that had come my way." And then continued about important lessons he made while being that famous among his peers. "I learned that if you put in the work, believe in yourself, and ignore the noise or pressure to stop doing what you're doing and putting in the work, respect, success, and happiness will come. I always kept that positive mindset and smiled at everyone at school in the hallways, still saying hi to those who doubted me because there's no reason for any hate out there. I want everyone to win and be happy. However, at the same time, fame at such a young age taught me not to trust anyone. Follow through with my word and live my life the best way I'd want to create for myself. Need to keep going through those hurdles and do what you want to do because at the end of the day, you're in control. While it seems that being successful at a young age can bring a lot of good, it didn't seem to be all roses and sunshine for Silento, because he went through some struggles with mental health and even took a break from performing and composing to focus more on his mental well-being. In 2017, the chain of legal issues involving Silento started. The very first episode was when Silento would not leave the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, due to a business dispute. The grounds of the dispute were that Silento did not show up for the 2 shows that he had to perform at Al Ain and Abu Dhabi on the 18th of February. As the owner of event organizer Mackey Entertainment, Mackey Taj El Sir Abdul Halim, said, "He didn't show up. I just wanted to get my own money back. I don't want to ruin his reputation." Abdul Halim wanted to recover performance fees, travel, and marketing costs, which were estimated at 300,000 dirhams or $81,500. The court ruling ordered Silento to pay the said amount of money. On the 20th of February, a travel ban was placed on Silento, and he was commanded to surrender his passport to the court until the money was paid off. A representative of Silento in the Middle East, Jenna Kadum, stated that the allegations were in question and in fact the promoter himself was guilty of not living up to his end of the deal. Silento did not cancel any shows at all. The rapper only learned of the travel ban against him on Wednesday. There was no comment from Jenna on whether Silento handed in his passport or not. The US Embassy in Abu Dhabi did not comment on the matter either. Silento became aware of the legal issues early Thursday when he finished his show in a Dubai nightclub. "I can't even leave the UAE, but I'm still in the club." In the late hours of Wednesday, Silento posted a link to his Twitter page encouraging fans to donate to his fundraiser, Free Silento, so that he could return to America again. After that, in 2020, 2 arrests followed each other. The first one was on August 28th when Silento was booked in Santa Ana for inflicting corporal injury on a spouse or a cohabitant in a domestic violence incident. He was charged with a felony and posted bond, but was released on the same day. After that, things got a bit weird because the internet, specifically Twitter, suggested that Silento's girlfriend allegedly leaked very private photos of Silento's behind that many users found disturbing. Supposedly, after that incident, the very next day, Silento was wandering the streets wielding a hatchet, and he walked into a random home looking for his girlfriend. Homeowners with their children were present the moment Silento walked in and were terrified. But one of the homeowners had a gun and was able to stop Silento. Luckily, nobody was harmed. In a few moments, Silento's friend came to the house and informed the rapper that he was at the wrong place. So together they took off. But LAPD officers chased Silento a block from his home and booked him and charged him with 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. He was taken into custody and posted bail of $105,000. In 2 months, Silento was arrested again, but this time it was for speeding in DeKalb County, Georgia. He was pulled over by a police officer at 3 a.m. for driving at 143 miles per hour. From his white BMW, Silento insisted that he didn't break any laws, and stated that firstly, he was driving at such a speed because he didn't want to be chased by fans, and second, if there are like 10 cars following me, I can do 143 because I'm not a regular person, and you could go and look on your computer and it would tell you that. But Silento was arrested again and held at DeKalb County, where he was informed of several charges and was later released on bond. The charges included speeding, reckless driving, failure to maintain the lane, and improper stopping. It was January 21st when police officers responded to the call in the residential area in DeKalb County, Georgia. The witnesses said something about hearing gunshots. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Frederick Roots bleeding on the street from being shot in the face and the leg. In no time, he was pronounced dead at 3 a.m. Detectives who arrived at the scene gathered security videos from the homes in the neighborhood, which showed several cars that were quickly driving away from the crime scene. Also, those videos captured at least 1 gunshot. Near the body, detectives found 8 bullet casings, At that moment, it wasn't clear who was the main suspect and what was the motive of the crime, but soon after, police determined that Silento was a suspect and probably committed the crime. It remained unclear how police found out that it was Silento. On the police department's Twitter page appeared an announcement. On January 21st, the DeKalb County Police Department investigated Rook's death after he was found shot on Deep Shoals Circle. Hawk is in DeKalb County Jail, charged with murder. After Silento was arrested, his publicist, Chanel Hudson, published the following statement on his Instagram page. "Please send my client Silento some positive vibration. Over the past several years, Ricky has been suffering immensely from a series of mental health illnesses. We will continue in his efforts of treatment, but we ask in the meantime that the public uplift him and his family in immediate prayer and positive energy. Ricky's a beautiful soul, and we hope that the same people who came up whipping and nay-naying with him continue to support him and be lifted in prayer. God bless." In the post description, she expressed her hopes that this situation would pass, as well as all previous ones. Chanel Hudson asserted that she had a very close relationship with her client, Ricky. She said that she was well aware of his mental health issues, specifically his struggles with anxiety and depression. But to her dissatisfaction, Silento was not consistent about getting better and resolving those problems. Chanel said that she believed that the case against her client was based on some shaky evidence, and she stated that the justice system would decide Silento's fate. No matter what his charges are, he's a human being, and it doesn't cost anything to pray for him and his family or send him positive vibrations. I hope people continue to have a little empathy. Hudson added at the time, former legal guardians and Ricky's attorney were assembling his criminal defense team, and the lawyer was constantly in touch with Silento in jail. Moreover, Chanel Hudson explained that in the last couple of years, presumably from the appearance of the first legal problem, she was trying to humanize Silento. She said that in May of 2019, she booked him on the daytime talk show The Doctors, where Silento got the chance to talk extensively about having mental issues. That wasn't a situation where he just showed up and sat down for 30 minutes. He did a psychological evaluation ahead of time. It was a 4 or 5 day process. While being on the show, Silento explained that he was already born with marijuana, cocaine, and heroin in his system. He mentioned his struggles with anxiety and depression and said that it was highly likely that he was prescribed ADHD medication by mistake. I don't know if these demons will ever go away. Chanel also pointed out the fact that Ricky was suffering from depression wasn't based on him being a failure. Quite the opposite, Silento was traveling around the globe, frequently performing, and making constant appearances on various children's television shows and programs. But when the pandemic took over, Silento broke to pieces and allegedly attempted suicide at the beginning of 2020. But unfortunately, nobody was really paying too much attention to what was happening to him. And after that suicide attempt, Silento showed some signs of destructive behavior and was arrested 3 times, each one getting more attention than the last. Despite that, bond on the current case was denied. Chanel Hudson stated that she planned to continue supporting Ricky because he supported her as well when she needed that. "I will not turn my back on him. I bet in some way, shape, or form, he's writing about his experience." On February 1st, Silento was charged with malice murder and felony murder. In a few months, Silento was booked into an Illinois jail on 1 count of murder. At the court hearing on June 9th, the judge looked over his mental health history and stated that he was a danger to society. Prosecutors on the cases stated that Ricky's grandparents wished their grandkid would stay in prison to prevent him from being a threat to himself and other people. And on August 3rd, he was indicted on charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm while committing a felony. His trial is yet to begin, and he has not yet taken any guilty plea. But it's one shocking turn of events that the man who created one of the biggest children's songs of the last decade is now facing life in prison at the young age of 24. In 2014, a member of the famed hacker group Anonymous sent out a series of tweets threatening one of the biggest record labels in the music industry, Atlantic Records. You have 24 hours to present a statement announcing the immediate release of Lupe Fiasco's album. If you do not comply, we will launch a direct attack against your website, your associates, and your executives. Once again, you have 24 hours starting now. Hashtag Operation Atlantic. What followed would make history. Lupe Fiasco was well known and respected within the hip-hop community and outside of it, not just for his elite lyricism and great music, but willingness to spread a positive message and speak out against injustices such as poverty, racism, police brutality, and America's foreign affairs and different wars, even if it may harm his career. This wasn't the first time he had issues with his record label and trying to obtain a release date for his album though. Back in 2010, he was gearing up to release his album Lasers, which he announced was finished, but Atlantic Records was not interested in releasing it anytime soon. Fans put together an online petition demanding Atlantic Records release Lasers, which got 5,000 signatures the first day and spread through blog sites. On October 7th, 2010, Lupe Fiasco posted a picture of himself with Atlantic president Julie Greenwald, and the next day they revealed the release date for Lasers would be March 8th, 2011. Despite the release date, fans still showed up and protested outside of the Atlantic Records office in New York City a week later, where executive Leor Cohen would come out with a large boombox playing some music for the fans. But this was just one of the many issues he had with Atlantic Records since he first signed. The only reason he even went to Atlantic was because of Jay-Z, who they both at the time believed was going to become president of Atlantic Records. But that ended up falling through because Jay-Z would instead become president of Island Def Jam Records, leaving Lupe Fiasco on Atlantic alone. For Lupe's original album, Food and Liquor, his label didn't even like it, and his business partner Chili had to refinance his own house to get the money needed to get that song on the radio themselves. When this became a breakout hit, Lupe alleged that Craig Kallman, who was the CEO at the time of Atlantic, was calling radio stations and telling them to stop playing Kick Push, a hit song by an artist on his record label. Why? Because Atlantic had nothing to benefit from it. The song was put on radio by Chili and Lupe. It had been recorded and created before their deal with Atlantic, and the producer behind it was Soundtrack, who's a part of Lupe's team. In an IG Live with Joe Budden, Lupe Fiasco tells the story of what Craig Kallman did next.
Okay, well that exists in the corporate world too though.
From an equity position, he didn't have any publishing, he didn't have any royalty rights, he didn't bring the producer, he didn't have anything to write it, he had nothing to do with it. You know what they did?
What?
They flew down to the Philippines to find the woman who we sampled the record from and bought the entire record from her. So they actually own the song that Kick Push is sampled from. That's what they did.
Anonymous origins are difficult to track. Some say they started on the 4chan message boards and began organizing in 2003, with their first high-profile acts happening in 2008. Originally, it was just fun pranks, but would eventually build and take on more political and social causes over time, and they became known as activists or hacktivists, using their hacking abilities to perpetuate their values. Being that they were anonymous, there's really no specific person or group. It became more of an idea and a collective that was adopted by people who participated in their attacks and who believed in what they believed in, which were loosely the following: opposing censorship and government control of the internet, advocates of free speech and making sure that information is free, opposing corruption and abuse of power by governments and corporations, and supporting social and political causes that involve civil and human rights. Lupe Fiasco's situation likely fell under the umbrella of the third point, where they probably believed that Atlantic Records was abusing their power by not letting an artist release his work, and whenever they rallied behind a cause, they were ready to lay down the law. One of the attacks that propelled them to fame was their 2011 cyber attack on the US Department of Justice website. The government had just shut down the file-sharing website Mega Upload. The attack, which was named Operation Payback, was carried out using a distributed denial of service, more commonly known as a DDoS attack, in which a large number of computers flood a website with traffic in order to overload its servers and make the site inaccessible to users. The attack was a response to the Department of Justice's decision to shut down Mega Upload and arrest its founder, Kim.com, on charges of copyright infringement. Kim.com's claim was that he wasn't guilty of copyright infringement. What he created was a file sharing service to allow people to upload and transfer files. And just because people decided to use his service to transfer and upload copyrighted material, that doesn't mean he approved of it or condoned it, nor should he be convicted of that crime. Anonymous saw the move as an attack on internet freedom and an infringement on the rights of Mega Upload users, many of whom were using the site to store and share legal files. Anonymous announced their intention to launch the attack in a series of tweets and posts on social media, and called on its followers to join the attack by downloading a DDoS tool called LOIC, which would be used to target the DOJ website. The attack was successful, and the DOJ website was temporarily brought down. In addition to the attack on the DOJ website, Anonymous also targeted the websites of the Motion Picture Association of America and the RIAA, which is the Recording Industry Association of America, in protest of their role in the crackdown of internet piracy. They also launched an attack in late 2014, close to the same time they threatened Atlantic Records on Sony Pictures in retaliation for the company's effort to block the release of the film The Interview, which was a comedy about an assassination plot against the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The hack of Sony was a major security breach, and massive amounts of sensitive data such as confidential financial documents, social security numbers, email archives, and personal information about celebrities and employees were stolen. The hackers also released several embarrassing emails sent by Sony executives. The attack was first announced by a Twitter account claiming to represent Anonymous, which stated that the group had launched the attack in response to Sony's effort to block the release of The Interview and to protest the company's treatment of its employees. The hack was later claimed by a group calling itself the Guardians of Peace, but many experts believe that they're affiliated with or at least sympathetic to the Anonymous group. In the aftermath of the hack, the US government officially attributed the Sony hack to North Korea, although some experts and Anonymous themselves have questioned this, saying it wasn't clear where the hackers were based or who was behind the attack. It seemed more like a political move by the US government to paint North Korea in a certain light. But these are just examples of why it made perfect sense that Atlantic Records complied with the request, or threat, made by Anonymous to announce a release date to Lupe Fiasco's album Tetsuo and Youth, because the next day they sent out a tweet saying, Lupe Fiasco's Tetsuo and Youth, January 20th, 2015. Mission accomplished. Lupe Fiasco offered his thanks by sending a tweet with just the letter V, symbolizing the character from the movie V for Vendetta that has the same mask that Anonymous represents. They also took credit for it with a statement the next day saying, 24 hours ago we released a short Twitter ultimatum. We called upon record label Atlantic Records, responsible for releasing conscious rap artist Lupe Fiasco's long-awaited album. We demanded a statement from the label within 24 hours to release a date, or we would unleash the complete and utter fury of our collective on their company and executives. 21 hours later, they released a short tweet citing the album and its release date. At this time, it can be concluded that we have proved our point. We wish music that is educating the masses to keep being released. We will fight for that. Lupe Fiasco, Talib Kweli, Mos Def, Common, and others are the moving force behind conscious rap. This is music we will fight for. Atlantic Records did keep their promise because Lupe Fiasco's album was released on that date to great critical acclaim, one of his greatest albums, and arguably the greatest hip-hop album of that year, despite it getting almost no promotion or support from the record label. It's a mystery why they decided to pick Lupe Fiasco as an artist to rally behind, but it just goes to show that despite the fact that a rapper or artist isn't consistently putting out hit songs that are reaching the masses, if their artwork has meaning, the ability to touch people, and serves a purpose greater than themselves, it's more than enough to get outside parties willing to bat for you, whether that is creating online petitions to get your music released, showing up and organizing in person to protest your music not being released, and even threatening your record label with consequences that could range from having their information leaked publicly, or perhaps things even worse than that they may be involved in behind the scenes. A rapper that was signed and had a song with P. Diddy walked into the 25th precinct on December 15, 2010 and confessed to shooting a man 17 years earlier. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sent to prison for 15 years to life. Travell Coleman was born on November 19, 1974, and grew up with his grandmother in the James Weldon Johnson housing projects. He grew up in the real ghetto, amongst a lot of criminal activity and the availability of drugs. He was known by the name G-Dep, short for Ghetto Dependent. He began his rapping career with Tape Kings and released 2 vinyl records in 95 and 96. Soon after, he met Sean Combs, who was already big at the time, and he signed G-Dep with Bad Boy Records for $350,000 in a 5-album deal. The next year, G-Dep appeared in 2 songs of Black Rob's debut album. He released his solo debut album for Bad Boy Records on November 20th, 2001, and it was called Child of the Ghetto. The album did not too great. It was 106th on the Billboard 200. The single from the debut album, Special Delivery, became relatively popular, and it got to number 3 on the Hot Rap Singles charts. G-Dep became one of the renowned names of Bad Boy Records and brought a lot of attention to the label, but the label had to let him go because of excessive dependence on drugs. It needs to be said that Bad Boy Records found G-Dep at a very good time, and Travell did help the label out after Biggie died. G-Dep also helped Diddy to lift his career as well, and he was signed by Diddy and featured in his music video Let's Get It too. But after Bad Boys cut ties with G-Dep, he had been looking for a new label that would sign him. G-Dep was building up a rap sheet for criminal activities. He had 25 criminal offenses, including grand larceny, drug offenses, and burglary since 2003. Also, he had been convicted and imprisoned in Rikers Island for robbery. G-Dep was mostly under the influence during this time and was dealing with personal issues. After the release of Child of the Ghetto, he began struggling with PCP addiction for a long time and grew dependent on it. The gangsta life he glorified in his songs with raps like Keep It Gangsta, which include lyrics like Keepin' America High and Why Wouldn't I, Gangsters Don't Talk, We Beat the Case and Walk. It's the same lifestyle that had tormented and disturbed him. He regretted everything good in his life, thinking that the success he had wasn't actually deserved. He was a married man with children, but he had been wrestling with his conscience for some time. His life spiraled into disarray with a slate of arrests on drugs, trespassing, and other charges. G-Dep's Bad Boy days were long gone, almost a decade gone by since his first album release. In 2010, he signed up with Famous Records to release his second album, Ghetto Legends. Everyone was talking about the Harlem-based rapper that knew him from his time at Bad Boy, and the release was supposed to be a return back to the scene and an elevation to mainstream. I'm thrilled that I finally chose Famous Records as my new label, and I'm quietly confident that with Mr. Collins' vast experience in the music industry, that Famous will be my home for some time to come. Only good things will come from this move. But that grand return was short-lived. The Harlem rapper had a deep and dark secret that ate away at him for years and made him confess to a criminal act that he somehow got away with. Travell Coleman reopened a cold case that was forgotten about by everyone. On December 15, 2010, G-Dep walked into the New York precinct and told the officers that he was the gunman in the murder of a Queens man in 1993. He even told the police that he actually tried confessing twice before, but he was sent back because the police thought he was too drunk and too high and was incapable of giving any confession. Travell had dropped out of school at the age of 18 in search of a music career. He funded recording sessions by selling coke on the streets of Harlem, he dabbled in drugs himself, and for $500 he had bought a gun. In the fall of '93, a month before his 19th birthday, Coleman used that gun to mug a stranger. G-Dep was riding his bicycle when he encountered John Henkel near a subway station of James Weldon Johnson housing projects on Park Avenue and East 114th Street, and pulled out his .40 caliber pistol trying to intimidate the victim to hand over his cash. He was standing under the scaffolding on Park Avenue, 114th Street. I was riding my bike. I told him, "Give me the money." He was kind of, unresponsive. The guy grabbed the gun, and I pulled the gun back, and that's when I fired. And the guy winced, and I didn't know what happened. Henkel tried to disarm G-Dep by grabbing the gun, but G-Dep pulled himself away and fired 3 shots. Travell didn't look where the shots hit. He immediately ran back to his bike and fled the scene. He didn't even know if the man was fatally wounded. He went around the block and came back after a while and looked from afar to see that there was a crowd with police vehicles standing by. He then backed up his bike and left. The next few days there were police in the neighborhood asking questions. The police even stopped G-Dep and asked about the shooting, and he said that he knew nothing of it. G-Dep thought the man didn't die as the police said the word shooting rather than murder. He threw away his pistol in the East River a few days later. For years, G-Dep had no idea whether Henkel had lived or died, though he later realized that he was indeed guilty of murder. What makes the case so baffling is that He initially got away with the crime, but while he might have lived in peace and under the radar, the ex-rapper subsequently revealed that the crime took a toll on him, as he struggled for years with drugs and built up an arrest record even after a successful music career. The incident simply wouldn't leave his thoughts, as he was plagued by what unfolded. It was after completing a 30-day recovery program in 2010 that Travell said that he recognized he wasn't adequately tackling his past. A lot of people were really cleansing their souls and really getting to the root of their problems. I was not. I would just be embellishing, telling stories about getting high. I wasn't being totally honest. After confessing, he went on trial, was convicted of second-degree murder, and was sentenced on May 8th, 2012 to 15 years in prison. I think I was just at a point where enough is enough. It never went away, me thinking about it, so it was like I had to do something about it. His confession even disturbed the family of the victim, because it brought back a lot of bad memories. The admission reportedly even led family members of Henkel to criticize G-Dep for speaking out, saying that the revelation brought painful memories back to the surface. G-Dep felt that admitting the crime was the right thing to do, with his attorneys acknowledging at the time that many thought the decision was foolish. Conscience drove him to do something. He thinks he did the right thing, his attorney told the Associated Press. There's a lot of people who think he's a fool for doing this. He doesn't think he's a fool. He says this has been like a blessing. It saved his life. I couldn't move on and keep trying to satisfy myself if I didn't deal with that, he told XXL in a jailhouse interview. I didn't know what was going to be the outcome, but that was the only way I knew to deal with it. The victim had grabbed the rapper's .40 caliber gun and he pulled it back and fired at the man 3 times. G-Dep told authorities in a recorded statement played during his trial. After the gunfire, he said he rode off on a bicycle, unsure whether he had been struck. G-Dep didn't testify at his trial. Authorities paired his account with the 1993 death of Henkel, aged 32. He was shot 3 times with a .40 caliber gun at the same corner in October of 1993 when G-Dep was nearing his 19th birthday. The more you study the evidence, you'll see it just matches up too greatly for coincidence. However, G-Dep's lawyer questioned whether the police had made the correct match. He pointed out differences between G-Dep's statement and Henkel's shooting, such as the rapper's claim that the shooting occurred in February or March, rather than the fall, and his description of the victim as blonde and clean-shaven, although Henkel had brown hair and had facial hair. The rapper claims he has no way of knowing whether Henkel was the man he shot. According to the lawyer, he eventually filled in some of the specifics with the information provided by the police. G-Dep turned down a plea bargain in exchange for a guaranteed 15-year to life term, which is now the bare minimum he faces. Regardless, he remains convinced he did the right thing by coming forward. He has a conscience and a heart, and his conscience and his heart brought him to where he is today, his lawyer said after court. He's probably making the most powerful statement of a rapper that his era can make, which is to be accountable and to do the right thing. After signing up with Bad Boys, Travell had a daughter and a girlfriend, but after that relationship ended, he met Crystal Sutton at a club. The couple was married in 2004 and had twin boys. He had experienced fame, fortune, and a family, but his guilt was eating away at him. It seemed like it just wasn't fair for me to be happy, he said. I used to curb my happiness, wait a minute, I'm smiling too much. I'm laughing too much. I felt like I couldn't really tell anybody. I didn't want them to be involved. Burdened by what happened, his music suffered, and Diddy dropped him from his Bad Boy label. It probably was the drugs, he said. I was just knee-deep in trying to medicate myself and not feel, and numb myself to whatever I was dealing with. After he confessed his crime, his family was in disbelief. I was like, no, that's not Travell. That's not even in his character to do that. He's a kind, loving person. After the case was made public, Diddy talked about it in December of 2010 on Sirius XM Radio's Shade 45. G-Dep is one of the nicest artists I ever worked with. You could always feel like something was troubling his soul because he was real quiet. But he's the type of guy who wouldn't hurt a fly. He did the right thing and manned up to it. But my prayers go out to him. He had a real bad drug problem, and that could have caused that situation. The editor-in-chief of GQ served as the jury foreman in the murder trial of John Henkel and has written about the case. You have to concede that the man probably lived in a jail in his house in his head for 18 years. The hard part about this case is that it involves a guy who didn't really need to come forward. Who did? I mean, he needed to come forward for his conscience, but we were wrestling with this as jurors because we kind of thought, why did you come forward? Our mission is very, very specific. Is this guy guilty? And I wrestled with that because I knew he was. I just didn't almost feel worthy of passing judgment on this guy. He did kill. I don't go into this with rose-colored glasses. I completely understand that for the people who knew John Henkel, it's a different story, and we have to keep that in mind. The jury found him guilty of second-degree murder, and on May 8, 2012, he was sentenced. He was 38 years old. The case of Travell Coleman has haunted me, Nelson said. I think the guy got a bad shake. I think he did something honorable and society punished him for it. Travell separated from his wife in 2008, but Sutton said she's still standing by him. She said she's still in doubt that her husband shot Henkel, but is now a different man. It's a different Travell to me, not on drugs. He feels freer, and you can tell by talking to him. He sounds a lot better, like the Travell I first met, caring, loving, trying to do what he can. So 12 years after the verdict was given against GDEP, the assistant district attorney of the case made a request to pardon him from his imprisonment, saying it was too harsh. He reached out to a clemency attorney at City University, and after that clemency attorney, Steve Zeidman, sent a letter to the judge of the Coleman case, he learned that the judge had already reached out to the current state governor. Currently, Travell is married to Letitia Evans at the moment, and they've been married for 6 years, exchanging vows at Elmira Correction Facilities. Coleman's wife is also a rapper known as Hustle Bunny. We still haven't seen the outcome of whether he will be pardoned, but he's been serving time for at least 10 years now. It's 2015 and an FBI agent named Daniela Green has decided to turn her back on the US. Her mission was to seduce the IS fighter and former rapper Dennis Cuthbert and lure him out of Syria, but in a strange twist of fate, she had been seduced by Cuthbert and was fleeing to Syria to become his bride. Dennis Cuthbert was born in Berlin, Germany. He was the son of a German mother and a Ghanaian father who would be deported before he was born. Over time, his mother found a new man who happened to be a US Army officer. Cuthbert and his new stepfather would not be the best of friends. In an interview with ex-Berliner, he revealed that his stepfather would brutally beat him. He described these beatings as really hard, with a belt and stuff, with grits and rice-a-roni. I had a tough time. During these difficult times, hip-hop was his saving grace. In the same interview, he describes his first experience of hip-hop. It was like, boom, in my head, niggas for life, niggas with attitude. During his teenage years, he became a member of the gang 36 Boys and got involved in drugs. He also decided to start a rapping career and released 3 albums between the years of 2006 and 2009. He was no longer Dennis Cuthbert, he was known as Dezo Dog. He didn't reach nationwide success, but was relatively well known in the Berlin area. It became immediately apparent that Tupac was a huge influence, with song titles like translations of All Eyes on Me in German and Mein Ambition as Rider, which pretty much My Ambition as a Rider. His second favorite rapper was DMX, an artist he even got to perform alongside. His career in entertainment started to grow, until a moment in 2009, he vanished. Dezo Dog was almost killed in a car crash, an event which would change him forever. He sought more meaning in his life, and would convert to Islam. Dezo Dog started attending a mosque in Neukölln. In what seemed like a very short span of time, he had achieved a new spiritual awakening. He incorporated this into his music, and while being a Muslim rapper isn't anything out of the ordinary even in the States, his lyrics started to become a lot more dark and violent. Then came the penultimate moment. In a tearful YouTube video, he announced that he now viewed music as haram, or forbidden, and was giving it up. He was no longer Dezo Dog anymore. He was Abu Malik. But this is where the first warning signs began to emerge. His local imam, Abdul Adim Kamus, had warned him that converting to Islam on his own had its dangers. In an interview with DW, Kamus said, "I told him that someone who is new to Islam has to be careful what direction they go in. With young people who come to me, I'm often afraid that they can become radicalized on the internet." Kamus soon realized that after a month, Dennis was no longer attending his lessons. He got word that he was involved in the Salafi scene of Islam, which was a lot more fundamental. He heard him singing jihadist songs on YouTube and decided to give him a call. On the phone, he said, "What are you doing? This is the wrong way." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not like that. Then after that he changed his numbers, and since then I have not had any contact with him. Camus' best way of explaining this radicalization was as a code of Islam. I think what Cuthbert had was a past, and he just put on a coat of Islam. He might have that coat on, but certain parts of his character stayed firmly in his roots. So radicalism was like a gang, but with more of a religious and righteous veneer to him. Abu Malik's views were completely at odds with the majority of people in Berlin. So in 2011, he took a one-way flight from Berlin to Cairo, Egypt. It was in Egypt that he joined an Al-Qaeda affiliated organization. He traveled to the Egyptian city of Mersa Matruh, where he received military training. He also received further training in Darna in Libya. He was now fully qualified as a soldier for his cause. And if this wasn't confusing enough, he was no longer called Abu Malik. He was now Abu Talha al-Almani, meaning Abu Talha the German. In 2012, he realized that Egypt was not where the true revolution was happening. The place where he could live under his vision of an Islamic caliphate was further east in Syria. He fought for Junud al-Sham, who alongside other groups were trying to overthrow the Syrian government and take advantage of the uprising that was happening there. There was a vacuum of power during this time, and these groups planned on filling the power vacuum now available in Syria and Iraq. During a formative battle against the Syrian Air Force, he was entrapped in a home, and shelling from the other side caused a brutal head injury. Abu Talha al-Almani was in a coma for an entire week. He posted in an online interview, "My head was open and some parts of my brain were coming out. The brothers cared about me a lot, and through the mercy of Allah, I woke up." And in the summer of 2014, these groups took the whole world by surprise. They conquered huge swaths of territory in northern Iraq and established an Islamic State. Members of Junud al-Sham gradually defected to IS. This stretched from Aleppo to Syria to Diyala in Iraq. At their peak, they had conquered land the size of Great Britain. With IS' newfound control, they were a force to be reckoned with. With al-Almani, they had a brilliant spokesperson to appeal to the young men they wanted to recruit. He was a charismatic rapper who came up under DMX music. He could speak English, German, and Arabic. He was their key representative for the German-speaking world of Germany, Austria, and parts of Switzerland. In July 2014, he presented a video of himself alongside a pile of corpses who IS had slain during their conquest. In November 2014, he was holding the head of a victim and said, "They were opponents of IS. That is why they have received the death sentence." He was using the same bravado and flexes that he learned making gangsta rap videos as if he was flexing some jewelry or cars. On his newfound platform, he made threats towards Barack Obama and the people of Germany, and he also encouraged people to conduct their own attacks. All of the information I've given you so far was more likely briefed to a woman named Daniela Green. She was an American woman who grew up in Germany, so she spoke fluent German, and she was given top security clearance from the FBI and was told to communicate with al-Almani over Skype. Her job was to convince al-Almani that she wanted to be his bride. She would then agree to meet him in Turkey so they could move across the border in Syria. The FBI would then ambush him while he was on Turkish soil. They spoke back and forth over Skype. Green had initially pretended to be smitten by al-Almani and gave the impression that she was interested in joining his cause. Over time, though, she had to put less work on this act. Eventually, it was no longer an act. She was genuinely head over heels for al-Almani. Then one day, al-Almani received a Skype message from a different account. It was Daniela. She came clean and told him that she really loved him and wanted to be his bride. Green told her employers that she was going on vacation to Germany to see some relatives. In reality, she was getting a one-way ticket to Turkey and was going to meet al-Almani to take her over to Syria on her own. The fact that al-Almani had the ability to seduce Green and make a non-Muslim top security FBI agent turn against him was the ultimate humiliation for the country. Not only that, but it gave him more credentials than anyone else on YouTube to be teaching people how to spit some game. Green met with al-Almani and they traveled to Syria. She had been sold a dream of the revolution that was coming. The reality from her perspective was much different. She had made a huge mistake. "I really made a mess of things this time," she told a friend in July 2014. Green immediately returned as it dawned upon her how horrifying this part of the world had become. How she managed to escape is difficult to tell, but I'd imagine leaving IS after you had just betrayed the FBI is a lot more difficult than joining them. She returned to the US, cooperated with the authorities, and took a 2-year prison sentence as a slap on the wrist. Not many people come back from Syria alive, and not many people get a 2-year sentence for something this grave. While al-Almani getting the upper hand on the FBI, the backlash against IS in the latter half of 2015 was quite severe. In October 2015, IS were badly hit by NATO forces, and al-Almani was reportedly killed. Elisa Smith, a Defense Department spokeswoman, said in an email, "I can confirm that an October 16th airstrike in Raqqa killed Dennis Cusper." IS continued to release videos of al-Almani. He made no mention of the airstrikes, so it was presumed that he was dead and they were pretending that he was alive. But rumors began to spread that, in fact, he was still alive. And in 2016, the Pentagon refuted their earlier claims. Al-Almani was still among us. This period would prove devastating for Europe and North America. Attacks occurred in Paris, London, Manchester, Orlando, Florida, Brussels, and Istanbul, all involving young men claiming affiliation to IS. In al-Almani's native Germany, a truck drove into the Breitscheidplatz Christmas market and killed 12 civilians. Someone had taken his words of advice and made an attack on German soil. And IS were treating its territory like an actual country. Away from the wars and violent prophecies, they were also willing to do the administration required to set up a country. They were collecting taxes so garbage would be collected. They were printing out birth and marriage certificates. Families were also receiving child benefits. For people living previously without any law or order, to some of them, their new society was an improvement. With al-Almani's survival, though, he had humiliated the West once again. The mistake couldn't have worked better for IS propaganda, whose fundamental claim was that the West was lying to them all the time. And when they said he was dead, and he came up alive, that didn't help their case. However, IS were simply aggravating too many people. An attack in St. Petersburg now meant that it wasn't just NATO countries who were looking to fight back, but Russia too. Putin and Barack Obama were both united in their hatred of this group. Similarly, Turkey and the Kurds, who were often at odds with one another, both wanted to get rid of IS. Everyone wanted them gone. And one of IS's biggest tactical mistakes was its attacks in the Muslim world. As well as high-profile attacks in London and Paris, it was targeting countries like Turkey, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia. Its attack on the holy city of Medina was particularly damning evidence that these people were indiscriminate. The young men they were trying to radicalize would think twice now. The militant group faced attacks from all sides. Separate coalitions led by the US, France, Russia, and the Gulf states were all waging war against them. And by December 2017, IS had lost 95% of the territory it once held. Al-Almani was finding his country shrinking and shrinking bit by bit. Daniela Green, meanwhile, was now out of prison and living a quiet life as a hotel worker. And on January 17, 2018, Al-Almani clashed with anti-IS forces, and the final days of IS would also be his final days. He was killed, and it was for real this time. A year later, in March 2019, IS lost its final territory. It was all over. But it was a new beginning for Daniela Green, who is still among us, with likely a new name and identity. The man who was known as the Chief of Chicago, who ruled the streets for some times, gained in popularity, signed a multi-million-dollar deal, but greed couldn't be stopped, and he decided to commit a bank robbery. The South Side of Chicago is home to many famous names within hip-hop, Lil Durk being one of the most famous ones in recent time who also looked up to this individual. But today we're going to focus on one that stands out the most. He was known as the Chief of Chicago, but also known as Bumpy Johnson or Bump J. It's true that Bump J had a crazy amount of respect not only from his people in Chicago and the Goon Squad, but in music. It seems like every day at least 30 people come up to me and just start rapping. Through the years, more than once, the streets have shown him admiration and love, which he got through releasing plenty of mixtapes and for his activity on those streets. 50 made it clear that you could create a buzz and be successful from the mixtape scene. It's like building a house. You put that first brick down, and after that you just start building, and it gets larger and larger. When he was 14, Bump J moved out of his mom's house and started to care for himself because they were living in too much poverty. My mom couldn't really pay her own bills, so I left so I could be on my own. He didn't get far and rented a place just around the corner from his home, and he started to push weight on the block so that he would have some income. I always seemed more advanced than the people around me, so private school was a good idea. It was either go to the public school and not get anything done, or go to private school and learn something and be productive. Bump J spent a lot of his free time on the streets and got involved in gang activity. He became a member of Four Corner Hustlers, which provided him with a sense of family and some sort of stability. When I joined, they told me they weren't a gang. They were an organization that was all about business and making money. Even though it was one of the smallest groups around, they seemed to resemble who I was. Chicago is very segregated, but at the same time, gangs here seem more organized and real strict on laws. Chicagoans are very slick and fast talkers. No matter where you go, you get respect if you're from Chicago. You can even look at Bishop Magic Don Juan and the life he led. Right now, he's in LA, a superstar. It was November 18, 2001 when one event gave a push for Bump J to start his rapping career. It was the day that his brother got murdered, and it was gang related. His brother had always encouraged Bump to try and become a rapper, to get some studio time and record his tracks, as Bump knew how to rhyme and it came natural to him. So from that day, Bump decided that he couldn't waste any more time and started rapping. After some time, Bump got hooked on the Goon Squad, which consisted of Bump J, Sly Polaroid, Brian Hustler, Chinaman, and G-Man. But soon enough, they lost G-Man to an unfortunate incident with the police. Members of the Goon Squad were connected, very close, which resulted in a lot of music and punchlines in their tracks. Amongst 7 mixtapes that they released, the most popular and favored was Welcome to Grimeyville, Dinner Time, and Chicago-Rilla. Hip-hop is more structured today than when it began years ago. There used to be a time when you could just rap and write how you felt and have feel-good music. Today you have to make a club song, a For Your Ride song, and a song for the females. But since there's a lot more money involved now, hip-hop has become more of a business. In 2003, Extreme Beats, who was a producer from Chicago, discovered Bump J. Later on, through that individual, Phil Edwards, who was the head of Free For All Records, was looking forward to getting Bump J to the next level. He remembered that the first time I met him, he had a show in the park. Children, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, everyone was out there. If you walked through the neighborhoods, they knew him. He was already a star on the streets. Bump and his Goon Squad were signed to Free For All, the production company, and instantly began more regular appearances on various mixtapes. Pretty soon, stations such as WGCI, WPWX, and B96 in Chicago started supporting Bump J and his music. Not only was he invited to be a participant in a few mixtapes from his region, but he was also welcomed by DJ Who Kid from New York. Later on, some labels were trying to win Bump over. He got some serious thinking and decided to stay with Atlantic Records. He was signed to a record deal for $1 million and a publishing deal for $2 million.
I signed a deal for less than for more than $1 million, and then I went and got a publishing deal for $2 million. Right. I heard him.
Bump J was working with Kanye West and Track Boys on the material for his album Nothing to Lose. Kanye was also a producer of the song Move Around, and that it was featured on Madden NFL 2006. And McDonald's acquired a license for it to be put on a television ad and shown around the whole summer of 2005. Despite releasing a hit song, there was still some beef going on between Free For All and Atlantic Records. Specifically, Free Maiden was not particularly happy with what Bump J was doing and the direction that everything was moving. So Bump J got out from under the label in 2006, which resulted in decreasing the amount of cash that he got while he was on the label. Bump J was always surrounded by a lot of acquaintances and friends with whom he used to hang out on the streets. And despite his popularity rising and getting serious money so that he could afford to have a few cars, he was still greedy and always wanted more. So he noticed that one guy from his circle was coming with his pockets full of cash, several cases in a row. Bump was curious how it was possible, and that friend told Bump that he was repeatedly robbing a bank that didn't have security. Curiosity got the best of him, and he decided to try doing that as well. He got together with one of his friends and they entered the bank in the Chase branch in Oak Park on the 4th of January 2007. The surveillance camera caught 2 men, one of which supposedly was Bump, who were waving handguns and announcing that a robbery was in place. Then they forced bank employees to give them cash from the teller drawers and a vault as well, leaving the bank with $108,135. All the people from the bank were safe and sound, and Bump's cut from the robbery was about $54,000. So the robbery was a successful one. The next months after the robbery, Bump J behaved very cautiously, so that under any circumstances, he wouldn't have to have a face-to-face interaction with the police. In a year and a half's time, the same acquaintance with whom Bump J robbed a bank was said to be talking to the police and pointed them out in the direction of Bump J. So in the fall of 2008, Bump was driving a car and he had a firearm on himself. Police officers stopped him on the matter of a traffic violation and took him into the custody of Carbondale Police Department. It was said that not only were the police looking for him, but the FBI as well, and they preferred to keep looking for him without publicly naming him as a person of interest. Bump J was charged with 1 count of violating federal firearm statutes and 1 count of bank robbery. With those charges in place, Bump was looking at 20 years in prison. But in August 2009, he took a plea deal that, as a result, that got him a minimum of 7 years in a federal correction institute. On September 29th, despite signing off the plea deal, Bump J was sentenced to serve 10 years in federal prison for armed bank robbery and a weapons charge. While in prison, Bump J tried to fill his days full of various chores so that time would fly by very quickly. He was writing some lyrics just to continue keeping his pen sharp, and he knew for sure what he wanted to achieve when he got out. Bump J was released from prison in April 2017, and he got straight to work. He was in the studio with Pusha T and Yo Gotti, and teased they had been working on the new single, F Up the Summer. At the same time, Bump J was working with Jeremiah, Rocky Fresh, and Cardo in studio sessions with whom he recorded 4 songs, but there were no indications that an album was going to come out. Through many acquaintances and people who knew Bump, they were saying that it was great to see him working and integrating into hip-hop from the moment that he got out of prison. In June of 2017, Bump J released a new video for the song Good to Be Home. That was the first time that fans got to see him doing some rapping after being gone for so long. The video was directed by Chicago videographer Aze Production, and it's just a basic rap video. Bump J in a Rolls wearing Just Don's Air Jordan 2s, and a lot of cityscapes and landscapes in this Chicago city. Then in August of 2017, Bump J dropped another video for his song I Want It All. The producer of the video is Chase Davis, and in the video, we could see Bump J and a lot of his homies having a good time in the club and celebrating life. The inspiration came from my guys. This video was shot mostly at my jeweler's birthday party, the Wholesale Jewelry King. I wanted the feel to be real, so I didn't tell anyone I was doing it, and we just started shooting. J Visuals directed it, got my concept, and brought it to life. From the moment of his release in April of that year, Bump J stated that he recorded over 60 songs. Right now, I'm stacking songs. I'm still on house arrest till September 21st. Then I'm able to move around. When I'm able to travel, I'm gonna flood the streets. Mark my words. In a year, June 2018, Bump J finally released his first album, I Don't Feel Rehabilitated, which was a 9-track LP and a collection of street stories of Chicago and classic Chicago street rap. The tracks from the album were produced by a bunch of different people, from Cardo, Money Motivated Music, and several other producers. And it captured a nature of Bump that had a little bit more pain to him than when he was recording years ago, as he had just served a lot of time. The incarceration didn't turn me into a different person. I was gone almost 10 years, so naturally I'm getting older, and maturity comes with age. But I'm still Bump, just more calculated. At the beginning of fall 2018, there were some hints that Kanye West was working with Bump J and Sly Polaroid on a 7-song EP, but it wasn't clear whether this EP was going to be released, and it still hasn't been since then. I think it won't be much different than when I was out. I've gotten better musically because I'm just a better man mentally. So I think hip-hop will love me just the same, if not more. People respect struggle and stand-up. I took my lick and never told, so I'll always be respected as a man, and that's what's important. Music has always been the easy part to me. It's unfortunate that a story of someone who was signed for $3 million, already had money prior to getting signed, would still have the feel and the urge to commit a bank robbery that could derail the momentum that he had built up over that time. And derail the momentum it did, because since he's been free, nobody's really talked about him from the generation of people that had no idea who he was when he first got locked up. The people that did know about him were people from Chicago who were young and had heard about him, or older people who knew what he was getting into prior to him being locked up. But when you do 10 years, coming out and still being successful is something very unlikely. Bobby Shmurda was much bigger than Bump J in terms of having a massive hit song, and he hadn't been able to capitalize on his release, and he did less time than Bump. But you can tell he was definitely committed to the lifestyle. Yo, Boosie, who's next? Were the words tattooed under his chest with a depiction of an AK-47. He received this tattoo 2 weeks after the murder of Terry Boyd, alluding to the idea that it was Boosie who gave the call to kill Terry. But then again, Boosie was good friends with Terry. He even had a child with his mother. So was he involved or not? Boosie, as we know, is the iconic Southern hip-hop act. He started his career with the stage name Lil Boosie and then would later change it to Boosie Badass, commonly known just now as just Boosie. But this video is not really about him. No, this video is about Lil Boosie's hitman, Marlo Mike, and the things he allegedly did on Boosie's command. Just a couple of lyrics that Boosie rapped mentioning this young man were as follows. Ain't no love in my body, Marlo Mike in the backseat begging for a body. Yo Marlo, he drive a Monte Carlo, that hoe gray, I want him dead today, here go to K. To give you a little pretext, by the age of 15, Marlo had already taken the lives of allegedly 9 people. That's right, this man wasn't to be taken lightly. Born in the hood of Baton Rouge, Marlo pretty much spent his childhood living around crime. Before a teenager, he had witnessed a murder happen right in front of him. Charleston White had recently come out and said that at the age of 5 years old, Marlo witnessed his own mother being killed. An incident that most definitely had a long-term effect on his psyche. Because of where he grew up and the things he saw in his childhood, Marlo would become a menace to society. He got expelled from middle school for carrying a gun while walking around campus, and although he had anger issues as a kid, he wasn't too violent, at least not in the traditional sense. His mother, however, was always concerned about her son because he'd often mentioned that he could hear voices in his head, possible schizophrenia, which is a bit odd and conflicting on the accounts that Charleston White made that he had witnessed his mother die, but this could have been a guardian. We're not entirely sure in that capacity. But having your adolescent son say that he could hear voices in his head isn't really anything to lose sleep over. Maybe he's finally become conscious of his thoughts. No idea. But it might have just been the mother's intuition that she could feel something wasn't right. And of course, things began to escalate rather quickly during his preteen and teenage years. During this time, Lil Boosie's raps had a strong influence on him, as it did a lot of people in the South. In fact, when Marlo was 14 years of age, he started living with Boosie in the same house. There's even a photo of Marlo hugging Boosie's daughter. In his words, Boosie stated that he saw Marlo as his own son, then even became his legal guardian. But for what it's worth, Marlo quickly developed a strong reputation as Lil Boosie's muscle, a stone-cold killer, a man who thinks nothing of taking someone's life. On September 22, 2009, Lil Boosie once again pled guilty to illegal possession of marijuana. This was the third time, and so the court ended up sentencing him to what have most likely just been 1 year, but because he violated his post-plea terms, his prison time doubled. Going back to Marlo Mike, he never, not once, shied away from crimes. Everything from property damage, dissing and resisting arrest, possession of illegal and dangerous substances, robberies, guns, you name it, he did the wrong thing as naturally as and involuntarily as he breathed. And at the core of these crimes was his obsession with drugs. He would get money by selling drugs, use that money to buy weed or lean, and this unhealthy cycle continued. Some could say he was probably self-medicating for a mental issue that never got diagnosed. At one instance, he pretty much killed someone for money, about $2,800, so that he could then use the money to buy some drugs. This then brings us to what happened on October 21st, 2009, the night when Terry Boyd was murdered. 6 bullets were fired from outside the window. By the time the police arrived, the man was already dead. Terry had been living there ever since he completed his 5-year stint at the Winfield Correctional Facility, which ended a month prior, and when things were investigated, marijuana, morphine, and codeine were found in Terry's bloodstream. That's right, Terry wasn't a stranger to the underground world either. Someone wanted him dead. The one who was charged for this murder, though, was Lil Boosie. It was reported that he gave $2,800 to Marlo Mike in order to kill someone, and that certain someone was Terry Boyd, though it wasn't just Marlo Mike. 2 other individuals, named Michael Judson and Adrian Pittman, were also directly involved in the shooting. Side note here, for the sake of convenience, we'll be referring to Michael Judson as Ghost from here on out. Apparently, Terry was involved with both of them. He allegedly stole $720 from Ghost, while Pittman simply held a grudge against Terry for who knows whatever reason that had to do with the streets. It's also revealed that in the hours leading up to the shooting, Boosie told Pittman and Ghost that he was willing to pay $25,000 to get Boyd killed. This was in the wake of a letter Pittman received from an inmate named Lucas. The contents of the letter suggested that Boyd was planning on doing something to Boosie before he was released from the prison. From the looks of it, Boosie knew that Terry was after his life. Maybe it was bad blood, or something even more sinister. We don't know for sure. All we have is that one statement from Marlo which states that Terry publicly disrespected Boosie while he was interacting with the fan. Though whatever the reason may be, Boosie was adamant in wanting Boyd dead before he pulled something. Hence, Pittman, Ghost, and of course Marlo carried out the assassination. They spotted him inside his house, Marlo let off the bullets, and then drove all the way to Boosie's home. There, Marlo was then given $2,800 for his participation. Boosie probably gave the rest of the money to Ghost and Pittman. Anyway, later when these three were caught and made to testify in court, they confirmed their involvement in the shooting. It was also revealed that Marlo Mike had been involved in 4 other such shootings prior to this. At least that's what they were able to find out back then. As for that letter, it stated that Terry was going to jack and slap him. But in Boosie's defense, his attorneys declare that the letter doesn't exist. Boosie has always had a friendly relationship with Terry, and he also had a child with his sister, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video. Though Marlo's tattoos while standing next to Adrian Pittman suggested otherwise. Because of this incident, Marlo ended up getting charged with 5 more murders, including the death of a rapper nicknamed Nussie, who was killed earlier that year, on February 9, 2009 to be more precise. In May of 2010, Marlo revealed to the authorities that he was told by Ghost that Lil Boosie wanted Nussie dead, but at that point, Ghost was also dead, so there was no way of confirming it with him if Marlo was telling the truth or just making it up. As for when Ghost died in all of this, well, it happened in the beginning of the new year. He was shot and then later died in the hospital. Still, Marlo was surprisingly thorough in his statements. He revealed that in reply to Nussie's death, Lil Boosie said this: "Ghost told me y'all hit that boy. I like that." Lil Boosie's involvement in the murders became exceedingly apparent at that point. While he wasn't charged with Nussie's death, he did get charged with Terry Boyd's death, considering how he allegedly paid Marlo to kill the guy. Well, the reason Lil Boosie wasn't charged with Nussie's death is because there was no contact between Marlo and him. It was Ghost who told Marlo to do it after all, but he confirmed that Ghost was paid $15,000 by Boosie, out of which Marlo himself received the $2,000. But this isn't all that Marlo said. He declared that the interrogators first threatened to confine his mother and stepfather, and they also claimed that Boosie had put a $25,000 bounty on his head, but the defense attorney later denied these allegations. Marlo Mike eventually got himself arrested, and this happened on May 14, 2010. He was charged with a lot of shootings and deaths that had happened in the prior years. He was on a killing spree for over a year, when since he was just 16, he managed to narrowly avoid the death penalty. The law didn't see him as a kid though. However, things took an interesting turn during Boosie's trial. Even though Marlo had basically confessed everything and put Lil Boosie out there, when the prosecutor Dana Cummings asked him about it again, he simply said that he never killed Terry Boyd, recanting his prior statements, and declared that Mr. Hatch never paid him to kill Terry Boyd. The prosecutor called Marlo out on this. She played phone recordings where someone is telling Marlo what to say in the trial, how he only mentioned Hatch, aka Lil Boosie's name, because his parents were being threatened. But now that the prosecutor was playing these recordings, Marlo's words lost all weight. He was literally just following a script. This is where Marlo talks about how the police lied to him, how they said Lil Boosie had placed a $20,000 contract out to get him killed. In the end, Lil Boosie, he made it out, but Marlo didn't. As for Marlo, he was charged with the deaths of Nussie and many other up-and-coming rappers and people that he had been involved with in prior murders. He did not receive the death penalty, but he was given a life sentence. For Lil Boosie, his case ended with just one charge, which was the death of Terry Boyd, which he managed to beat the case on that and then just ended up doing time for the other drug charges that he had. On March 5th, 2014, Boosie was once again a free man. He went on to state, "Prison is not a place for humans. It's an animal house." Meanwhile, Marlo Mike is still in prison. The judge refused the appeal to change the lifetime prison term by calling Marlowe the worst of the worst and rotten to the core. Back in 2013, he wrote Lil Boosie a little letter, which said, "I miss them good old days. I wish I was still in that world to lay the law down." Was Marlowe Mike mentally ill? Does he have any remorse for what he did? Was he even mentally capable of understanding what he did? We may never know. Before YNW Melly was facing the death penalty, there was another man that was one of the original faces of rap in the 80s who had a shot at a bright and luxurious future, but instead, he ended up on actual death row and sentenced. Another rapper that's currently facing death row is YNW Melly, who started out as a star rapper and ended up with a murder charge. When YNW Melly was 18 years old, he released his EP Collect Call in late 2017. In the summer of 2018, he released his first mixtape, I Am You, which included his hit song Murder on My Mind. That song instantly became a hit and slowly got more and more popular, reaching 4 times platinum. He even did a song with Kanye West, Mixed Personalities, that was platinum, and was on the album We All Shine, which was released while YNW Melly was incarcerated. The song peaked at number 42 on the Hot 100 in 2019. Before popularity, YNW Melly had a lot of problems with the law since he was a teenager. Also, he was a suspect in the shooting and death of the Indian River County Sheriff's deputy, Gary Chambliss, and said that he might be one of the people who fired a gun and killed the deputy. But the reason why YNW Melly is currently on death row is that allegedly he, with YNW Bortland, killed 2 of their friends, YNW Juvie and YNW Sack Chaser. Bortland was arrested in Texas while Melly turned himself into officials in Broward County. Both were charged with first-degree murder, and they said that the plot was to murder their friends for some time, and they agreed to stage it as a drive-by shooting. But like I said, even if YNW Melly is sentenced to the death penalty, he wouldn't be the first rapper. Kool C was the first. It was the early 80s when hip-hop was only at the beginning of a long way to being a commercial art form. And already Kool C and his homie Steady B were blowing up. They performed a lot at Fairmount Park in West Philadelphia. They had their album being distributed through the city and waiting for potential buyers in famous places like at Funko Mart, which was on Market Street. Kool C was acquainted with Steady B while both of them were studying at Overbrook High School, where they were both end up signing to Pop Art record label. These guys were the quintessential Philly rappers. They had that Philly aggression and cockiness that just made them completely ours. Steady B came out with the song dissing LL Cool J, I'll Take Your Radio, and Kool C made a track talking about the Juice Crew diss. Pop Art record label was located in West Philly on City Lane Avenue and was owned by Lawrence Goodman. At the time, the label was a real deal in the hip-hop world in Philly, as a lot of popular artists were releasing through it. Hip-hop was still very much a singles medium back then, and Pop Art Records was more influential than they're given credit for. The Goodmans were street dudes, but they knew hip-hop. This was back in the 80s. We had these guys representing where we was from, and that was special too. Steady B and Kool C both represented that Philly hustle mentality. Steady B was Goodman's nephew, so he was first to be signed to the label and released his album, Just Call Us Deaf. Together with the label, Steady B was on a mission to really take the flyness of Philly to the masses. Before being signed to Pop Art label, Kool C made several appearances on 3 Times Dope Records. In 1988, Kool C released the first single, C Is Cool, which was produced by Steady B and Goodman. Steady B had helped a lot through the recording process, and soon it became an unofficial soundtrack of the city. But soon after, Kool C released his first album, I Got a Habit, which was enjoyed by crowds not only from his hood, but from the whole city. Popular radio personality Lady B recalled those times and said, "That song was so awesome. Back then, Kool C was just a fun-loving kid who loved hip-hop. Back then, everyone in Philly was into representing their neighborhood. With me coming from West Philly, I'm an original hilltopper. I thought the whole crew was very creative, but when the Goodman brothers got Kool C signed to a major, Atlantic Records, that was big." Lionel Martin, who was the urban music director, was hired by Lawrence Goodman to shoot the video for Glamorous Life. Kool C was a very nice, polite young man. Kool C surely knew how to dress, and it was evident whenever he was doing photo shoots or videos. Schoolie D, who helped establish gangsta rap as a genre with his song PSK, was an acquaintance of Kool C, recollected that when it came to fashion, he was slick. We all had tailors back then who made us suits, and Cool C was into flashy fashions. Back when the 90s came, all of that changed. All good things must come to an end, and the golden age of Cool C seemed to pass when he released the album Life in the Ghetto in 1990, which wasn't even half as successful as the previous album, and Atlantic Records had to show him the door. Even though Cool C was displeased, he formed a new crew, CEB, with Steady B and DJ Ultimate Ease in 1993, and they released their first and last album, Countin' Endless Bank, on Rough House Columbia. The first single from the album, Get the Point, was about gangsters that robbed the barbershop and then were locked down. For many fans of Cool C, his new rhetoric seemed a bit out of tune and slightly forced, which could have represented the sufficient drop in sales. Less than 15,000 copies were sold. It was the early morning of January 2nd, 1996. A plenty section of PNC Bank on Rising Sun Avenue was making a few last touches before opening its doors to visitors. The bank manager had just entered the building, but he didn't know that his every move was closely monitored by Cool C and Mark Canty, who were getting ready to rob the bank. In the car nearby was the third man of the heist, Steady B, who was the wheelman and the getaway driver. And it was no coincidence that the trio chose this branch, as no security guard was assigned to it. Cool C was carrying a .38 caliber revolver, while Canty carried a semi-automatic 9mm. As soon as the first PNC employee arrived at the bank, Cool C and his partner made their way through the front door. The manager was pushed to the floor while Canty took an employee to the back to open the vault. It wasn't their first hit, so Canty was waiting to score big again. But he didn't know that as soon as Cool C and his partner entered the bank, a silent alarm was triggered, and help was on the way. In patrol car number 2516, a female police officer, Laretha Verd, was riding solo and answered the call right away. As soon as Verd came close to the bank door, Canty saw her and screamed to Cool C, "Here comes the heat." It was evident that from that moment, Cool C's thoughts were about getting away from the police officer, who was coming closer and closer, rather than about the past or potential future paydays. Hiding behind the door, he saw a piece of her blue clothing in her face. He was ready to remove what he saw as the obstacle from his crew's way. "Don't worry, I'll take care of her." He was fast to make his partner calm, and then he fired his .38 caliber revolver. The single bullet that came from his gun smashed through Verd's chest, piercing through her liver and heart. The blood spilled from her body, and she fell to the floor. Right after, Cool C exchanged fire with another police officer and ran away with Canty to the van, which sped away from the crime scene. The guns were left on the scene, and the whole incident was captured on security cameras. Officer Laretha Verd, before becoming a police officer, was a teacher's aide at Pickett Middle School in Germantown. She joined the police force in 1986 when she was 34 years old, and at the moment of the robbery, she was a 9-year veteran at the 25th District. Laretha Verd was a mother with 2 sons, Steven, 11 years old, and Michael, 17 years old, and also took care of her aging parents, and she was the first female police officer in Philadelphia to be killed in the line of duty. Despite Officer Verd wearing a bulletproof vest, it lacked bullet-resistant panels, which was why the bullet came right through and pierced through her body. She was taken to St. Christopher's Hospital, where she was pronounced dead at 9:56 a.m. In another bank across town, her parents heard of their daughter's death from the television. The guns that were left in a hurry by Canty and Cool C were found by the police officers outside of different entrances of the bank. The minivan that Steady B was driving was stolen and was later found abandoned not far from the bank. Police officers found a lot of clothes that were worn by Cool C and Canty. All this evidence together led to their arrest, not to mention that Steady B's girl, where they all met up back at his house, would later testify and give all of this information, even though it wasn't necessary considering how much actual evidence the police had. Guns were traced back to Canty and Steady B. The .38 caliber revolver that Officer Verd was killed from belonged to a relative of Canty and was in his possession till the moment of the robbery. The semi-automatic 9mm was traced back to a friend of Steady B who acquired the gun for him. At the same time, Cool C and Steady B were laying low, hiding in the shadows, nervously thinking about what their next move should be and whether somebody was coming after him. Steady B was arrested outside of his home 2 days after the robbery, on January 4th, 1996. Steady B decided to make a confession and tell, and gave up his partners in the crime. Despite that, Cool C turned himself in on January 6th. He stated that he was innocent and has since maintained his innocence. and his lawyer, Charles Peruto Jr., banned him from being questioned. Cool C's mother was protecting her son and claimed that at the time of the robbery, Cool C was safe and sound at home with her eating his breakfast. 2 weeks after Steady B's confession, though, Canty was arrested in Maryland. When Cool C and Steady B were arrested, the head of the label, Lawrence Goodman, told the reporters, "I was totally outdone when I heard it. We couldn't believe it. They've never been in trouble, to my knowledge." On October 30th, 1996, Cool C was found guilty of first-degree murder, 3 counts of robbery, conspiracy, aggravated assault, burglary, and possession of an instrument of crime. Steady B and Canty were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And the likelihood that they didn't get the death penalty was because they decided to cooperate. On November 1st, 1996, Cool C received the death penalty for murdering Verde and was on death row awaiting execution in State Correctional Institution Greene in Pennsylvania. On January 10th, 2006, Cool C's death warrant was signed by Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell, and his execution date was set for March 9th, 2006. On February 1st, Cool C was granted a stay of execution by Pennsylvania Judge Gary Glazer. Then Cool C's execution was set for January 8th, 2015. But he was granted a second stay of execution by Pennsylvania Judge Louis Philippe Restrepo on 5th of December, 2014. He's still alive today, awaiting execution, and during his time in prison converted to Islam and found a new spiritual path while he was there. One of the radio hosts we quoted earlier, Lady B, had this to say: "I never knew those guys to be gangsters. Knowing their upbringing, that wasn't the cloth they were cut from. They let that materialistic side of hip-hop get the best of them. They just didn't wake up that morning intending to kill a cop." On October 30th, 2002, 50 Cent's mentor had died. Jason Jam Master J. Mizell was shot and killed in his own recording studio in Queens, New York in the early evening. The witnesses reported hearing several shots being fired, and when the police arrived at the scene, Jam Master Jay was already dead from a gunshot wound to the head. The police immediately launched an investigation into the murder. Theories started emerging about the possible motives for the murder that included a drug deal gone wrong, a debt owed to an old neighborhood acquaintance, revenge by disgruntled rappers with whom Jay had worked and who may have killed him over a disputed music publishing advance, or even a possible connection to 50 Cent, who had been a protege of Jay's. But despite numerous leads and theories, the case went cold for nearly 2 decades, and everyone wondered how the killer wasn't found with so many potential eyewitnesses. Jay was born in Brooklyn in 1965, and his family moved to Hollis, Queens when he was 10 years old. He learned how to play guitar, bass, and drums as a kid and started DJing in his teens. Eventually, he teamed up with Joseph Run Simmons, with whom he often played basketball, and Daryl DMC McDaniels in 1982 to create Run DMC. Many believe that this group gave birth to modern hip-hop. Run DMC was one of the first hip-hop groups to cross over into mainstream success and played a huge part in the rise of hip-hop's popularity worldwide. There really has yet to be another hip-hop act like Run DMC. They accomplished so much, broke so many records, and broke down so many barriers, as well as establishing many trends. They became instant stars. Their debut single, It's Like That, was one of the first rap songs where MCs talked about socio-political issues such as unemployment. In 1984, they were the first rap act to appear on MTV with the hit Rock Box, becoming popular with the cable channel's largely white audience with their fusion of hardcore hip-hop and even guitar. Their debut album, Run DMC, in 1984 featured the hit singles It's Like That and Sucker MCs, became the first rap album to get gold status. And Jay was the key player according to Jim Tremaine, an editor of DJ Times, a trade magazine for DJs. Run DMC came at a time when rap was not fully embraced by even the urban culture. People can't understand how important they were in pop music history. They were absolutely as revolutionary as Elvis when it came to popularizing rap, and it was Jay who provided the beat. Their collaboration with Aerosmith further solidified the rap rock legacy that they founded in 1984, resulting in Walk This Way becoming the first rap song to reach the top 5 of the Billboard Hot 100.
But their third album, Raising Hell, released in 1986, took things to another level. The album's lead single, My Adidas, was a tribute to the group's love for the German sneakers. In 1986, Adidas executive Angelo Anastasio attended a concert by the group at Madison Square Garden. During the song, Run asked the crowd to raise their sneakers in the air. Anastasio quickly signed Run DMC to a $1 million endorsement deal, which also included their own signature shoes, after realizing the power of hip-hop marketing when he saw thousands of people holding up their Adidas sneakers in the air. This led to the first hip-hop endorsement deal ever. With additional hits such as It's Tricky, the album sold over 1 million copies within a few months, making it one of the first rap albums to ever be certified platinum. And by April of the following year, the album was certified 3 times platinum, making the group the first act to go multi-platinum. By the late 80s, Jay was branching out on his own. He produced The Ruler's Back, the popular track that would later be used by Jay-Z for his own song of the same name, and in 1989, Jay launched his own label, JMJ Records. Even though his label's roster would feature an eclectic collection of artists, it would be in 1992 that JMJ Records scored its first major win as a label. Jay signed Onyx, a quartet out of South Jamaica, Queens, with a penchant for aggressive and rough rhymes. In 1992, the label released the single Throw Your Guns, and it became a much requested radio hit on East Coast stations. It eventually rose to number 1 on Billboard's Hot Rap Singles charts and floated around the lower reaches of the Hot 100. Onyx's next single, Slam, became the group's major breakthrough. The song took over the radio in the spring of 1993, going all the way to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. The group's debut album, Back Up, was a platinum seller, and JMJ Records was seeing its first major success, alongside a resurgent Run DMC who'd seen their own Billboard Top 10 hit with Down with the King just a few months prior. However, Jam Master Jay's roots and his heart were always tied to Queens. In the late 90s, he found another undiscovered gem in his home borough, a brash battle rapper named Curtis James Jackson III, or as we know him, 50 Cent, was making a name for himself, and Jay was struck by his confrontational style. Although 50 would eventually sign with Eminem on Dre's Aftermath and Shady record label, Jay was the first who became aware of this future superstar. 50 Cent's breakthrough would finally come in 2002. Sadly, Jam Master Jay was killed in October of that year. Over the next 2 decades, Jay's murder achieved a mythic status as one of the rap world's coldest cases. There were plenty of leads, but none of them resulted in charges, until 2020. According to the prosecution and court documents, it's been challenging to convict Jay's murders given the attempts to intimidate and silence potential witnesses. Despite those situations that discouraged witnesses from testifying, they were willing to talk after 18 years. In August 2020, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York has alleged that Mizell was murdered by Ronald Tenard Washington and Carl Jordan, also known as Little D or Noid, who were upset that they had been cut out of a drug deal. The 2 men were charged with murder while engaged in drug trafficking in a 10-count indictment unsealed on Monday the 17th in the U.S. District Court in Brooklyn of 2022. On or about October 30, 2002, within the Eastern District of New York and elsewhere, the defendants Carl Jordan Jr., known as Little D and Noid, and Ronald Washington, also known as Tenard, together with others while engaged in an offense punishable under Section 841, to wit, a conspiracy to distribute 5 kilograms or more of a mixture or substance containing cocaine, a Schedule II controlled substance, did knowingly and intentionally kill and counsel, command, induce, and cause the intentional killing of an individual, to wit, Jason Mizell, also known as Jam Master Jay, and such killing did result. Little D was arrested on Sunday, and Tenard was currently serving a prison sentence for robbery. Both had pled not guilty. In court papers released in 2007, Tenard was first confirmed to be a suspect in Jay's murder. Also, the same documents named him as a suspect in the 1995 fatal shooting of Randy Walker, an associate of the rapper Tupac Shakur. He had previously denied involvement in either case and in a sworn statement referred to Jay as a childhood friend. Run DMC bandmate DMC said he had mixed emotions about the long-awaited arrest. Although this latest news opens up a lot of painful memories for all of us who knew and loved Jam Master Jay, I'm relieved to hear that 2 suspects have been arrested and charged with this murder. It's been a difficult 18 years not having him around, while knowing that his murderers were not yet indicted for this heinous crime. Fans let out a collective sigh of relief when they were apprehended. The trial is expected to begin sometime in February, and if found guilty, they face a minimum of 20 years and a maximum of life in prison. Jay's murder received off and on attention from authorities as well as the media over the years. The case was the center of many documentaries such as Set the Record Straight, the Jam Master Jay case that gave exclusive information and insights into the complex legacy of the pioneer, and a 2018 episode of the Netflix documentary series Remastered that looked at the loose threads in the killing as well as the lack of urgency displayed by law enforcement to solve it back then. In the years that passed, his legacy has only grown more noticeable though. Just before he got killed, he had founded the Scratch DJ Academy, which was established to provide music education to young people, and it was a testament to Jay's commitment to giving back to his neighborhood, community, and hip-hop as a whole through promoting the art of DJing. Through the Scratch Academy, future generations would have had the opportunity to learn from and be inspired by Jay's talent and passion for music. His legacy as a pioneer of hip-hop and a master of the turntables will continue to influence and inspire musicians for years to come, and hopefully, even 2 decades later, he's finally able to get justice. With the growing list of rappers that have been killed, one would think that choosing a career in hip-hop is the most dangerous job in the world, which is something that French Montana said. Unfortunately, in the past 40 years, tragedy struck the music world as numerous young, rising rappers fell victims to gun violence, some that weren't even involved in gang activity at all, leaving behind shattered dreams and legacies cut short. Despite a promising future in hip-hop, a young and upcoming rapper's life was cut short when he was murdered in 2000. He was only 21 years old when he was gunned down in Compton, California. He was an affiliate of the Campanella Park Bloods, a black street gang on the west side of Rosewood, also called Compton, California. Just after midnight on July 4, 2000, Johnny Malsberg Burns and a friend headed to the home of another friend. While the driver went inside to visit, Malsberg chose to remain outside. As Malsberg sat in the car, a second vehicle pulled up with 2 unknown individuals who robbed, shot, and killed Malsberg. The circumstances surrounding his death remained a mystery, and the case still remains unsolved. His death was a shock to the hip-hop community, and many people were devastated by the loss of such a talented young artist. One of those people was David DJ Quick Marvin Blake, who discovered the talented rapper. The loss of Malsberg left a lasting impression on DJ Quick, who was both his mentor and a close friend and collaborator. He remembers that day in great pain. "I was in bed. We had just dropped him off. It was July 3rd and we had been working all day. He took the 4th of July off so he could be with his family. I was at a family reunion, but I felt that something was wrong. I wanted to go pick him up on my motorcycle, but people were like, nah man, he's chilling. So I went home and went to sleep around midnight. I got a call at 1:30 a.m. saying, well, you know, just Malsberg is dead. He was just a young man. F being a rap artist. He's a human being. Who did he piss off so bad to take his life? That resentment could have been fixed with an apology or 2 men having an understanding. Why kill him? Why didn't he get his money from the record company? He had already started to generate income. Why didn't he get enough money to move out the hood? Being in the hood causes jealousy sometimes when you start being popular. Why didn't Stan Shepard and them give him his money to move out the neighborhood so he could be safe? He was just a child. It's sad to hear that, but I couldn't even go to the hospital to see him. They said he died with tears in his eyes. Man, damn, tears in his eyes. That's life. Afterward, he dedicated much of his time and energy to helping solve the case and honoring Malsberg's memory. But how did their relationship start? DJ Quick and Malsberg met at a local concert in 1997. They quickly became friends after Quick was impressed by the young MC's polished flow and confidence on stage. Malsberg was one of many artists Quick collaborated with, as Quick was known for bringing the best out of rappers. Malsberg was a talented rapper with a distinct style, and his fan base would grow fast. Malsberg made his debut on the track Down, Down, Down from DJ Quick's 1998 album Rhythmalism. The album reached number 63 on the Billboard 200 chart. The up-and-coming rapper also collaborated on records with R. Kelly, Snoop Dogg, Warren G, and Nate Dogg, among others. However, the most notable appearance was on Snoop Dogg's No Limit Top Dog album on the track Don't Tell, produced by DJ Quick in 1999. The album sold 187,000 copies in its first week alone in the US, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard. However, it turned out to be Snoop Dogg's least popular album of the 90s and his first to not enter the charts at number 1. With his buzz slowly building in 2000, Malsberg made an appearance on the Connected Project Volume 1, a compilation indie album by the rapper Sugar Free alongside DJ Quick, Exhibit, High C,
Play a Ham, and others with the single Shut Up. And then it was time for him to take it to the next level. With his solo debut album coming out in a few months, Milesburg's future looked promising. Unfortunately, he didn't have a chance to witness the release of his highly anticipated album, leaving behind a musical legacy that was never fully realized. His debut album, Nonfiction, was released posthumously in 2000 by Shepherd Lane Records. However, DJ Quick was unhappy with what the record label did to his protege's album. I wasn't satisfied with the mastering. I spent a lot of money personally, maybe 40 grand in the studio to produce it right. When I finally mixed the record, I gave it to Stan Shepherd. He took them to this hole-in-the-wall mastering plant. It made the whole album sound like an MP3 as opposed to the big, lush, analog albums we're known to make. So of course I was unhappy. We can't even find Stan Shepherd to get the original master tapes. DJ Quick is one of the most successful and respected artists in hip-hop history, and he continues to produce innovative and powerful music that's loved by fans around the world. His love for music formed at a very young age, and by the age of 12, he could already play several instruments. He jump-started his path to fame by selling mixtapes he made with the turntable he received while still in school, and his popularity increased as a result of self-promotion, and he began to DJ and host events in Southern California. DJ Quick generated so much buzz on the streets that he caught the attention of local record labels Ruthless Records and Profile Records. He decided to sign with Profile despite Eazy-E's $1 million offer. On February 12, 1991, DJ Quick released his debut album, Quick Is the Name, which peaked at number 29 on the Billboard 200 and sold 50,000 copies in its first week. The singles Tonight and Born and Raised in Compton were both hits from the album. After about 4 years, the album was certified platinum and had sold over 1 million copies. In 2000, Arista Records dropped DJ Quick and he started his own label, Mad Science Recordings. In 2005, he released the critically acclaimed album Trauma, re-released Under the Influence, and released Greatest Hits live at the House of Blues the following year. In 2009, Blackout, a joint album with Corrupt, was released and debuted at number 61 on the Billboard 200, selling 10,000 copies in its first week. He was an instrumental part of the G-Funk sound and helped it to gain popularity early in the rap world, and his music was most known for its innovative beats, powerful lyrics, very West Coast, and he's been credited with helping to define the West Coast sound within hip-hop. Beside having several critically acclaimed albums such as Quick Is the Name, Way Too Funky, and Rhythmalism, he's also worked with many of the biggest names in hip-hop and on the West Coast. However, at the end of last year, DJ Quick expressed his belief that he's less appreciated than Dr. Dre in the hip-hop community, despite his contributions to the genre. Quick expressed his thoughts and frustrations about it all in a series of tweets. I know it's early, but I deserve to be where Dre is. I don't think it's fair, but I understand why. I've never had a machine behind me. That always hurt my friends more than it did me. He added that he was happy knowing that he's contributed to the development of careers, even though he's aware that he'll never be as famous as he feels he should be. He ended the tweets by stating that even though he views Dr. Dre as a real-life rival, he's not having a meltdown and is simply expressing himself. Several years ago, Dr. Dre and Quick worked together on the song Put It On Me for the Training Day soundtrack. DJ Quick's made a huge impact in the hip-hop industry by jumpstarting the careers of many talented artists over the years, but Milesburg holds a special place in his heart, and he often thinks about him. I think about him every day. Even if I don't, constant things just cross my mind. I've got him tattooed on my arm. I'll never forget about him. I got his name big as hell on my right forearm. That's something that will never go away. It's unfortunate you learn to love people and yet you live in a society where love ain't important. The society systems are all messed up. He gets his life taken and for nothing. He didn't get robbed. He didn't get jacked. He wasn't caught in bed with somebody's wife. MFs can get killed for nothing, man. It's just such BS. Despite Milesburg's short life, his impact on the hip-hop community, especially in the West Coast and his city of Compton, could have been significant. On the other hand, DJ Quick has become one of the most successful and respected artists within hip-hop history, and his dedication to honoring Milesburg's memory is a testament to the deep and lasting friendship that they shared. In the early hours of April 11, 2006, Deshaun Dupree Holton, aka Proof, a fellow rapper and best friend of rap superstar Eminem, was shot thrice, twice in the chest and once in the head, killing him instantly on the spot. Eminem would describe Proof as a people lover, saying, "He loved people and people loved him. He was just a people magnet." Thousands of people, celebrities included, would attend Proof's funeral, leading to a traffic blockade that afternoon. So what happened that April morning, and how did what started out as an innocent game of pool turn into a gruesome murder scene? Proof and Eminem met as teenagers, where they bonded over a common love for hip-hop and dreams of stardom. Though attending different high schools, Proof would sneak Eminem into his school's cafeteria to freestyle for rap battles. After failing out of the 9th grade, Eminem would go on to undertake a number of odd jobs, including working at the restaurant Gilbert's Lodge. With a daughter and girlfriend in the picture, alongside other mounting responsibilities, his rap dream wavered. With Proof's insistence, Eminem began to freestyle at the Hip Hop Shop, a clothing shop come day and party scene come weekend where Proof acted as a battle MC. Proof's encouragement was especially important at a time when Eminem was accused of being a poser in the black-dominated rap scene in Detroit. Proof would also provide a place for Eminem to rest his head on during the tumultuous episodes Eminem usually had with his then on-and-off-again girlfriend and future wife, Kim. Proof introduced Eminem to Rosenberg, a music lawyer in the making at the time and Eminem's future manager, by having Eminem unknowingly audition for Rosenberg in the hip-hop shop after all the other freestylers had cleared out. When Eminem said there would be no Slim Shady without Proof, he wasn't lying. It was Proof's idea that they formed the D12 group, short for Detroit 12, and Dirty Dozen, a rap collective. The idea, according to Proof, was to have the group create dark, half-alter egos to explore hardcore styles. Per Proof's word, to have a personality where you would just say anything, you don't give a damn. A direct result of D12 was Eminem's alter ego Slim Shady. Slim Shady would be of great importance to Eminem's career trajectory. For one, inspired a demo track which would then get into the hands of Dr. Dre and be his leeway to stardom. Then D12 would go on to have chart-topping albums in the US, UK, and Australia. This experience would top off as one of Eminem's best moments in the music industry at the time. He made this known in a report made by Rolling Stone where he spoke highly of the D12 members, including Proof. "They're my foundation," he said. "If I lose my foundation, then what do I have? Just to be myself on a big-ass mountain? A little lonely rich bastard? Not only are these guys my friends, I don't trust nobody new that I meet. At all." True to his word, these words would carry weight in the years following Proof's death and would shed more light on Eminem's stance in the controversy surrounding it. Proof and Eminem remained close friends even after Eminem's breakout into the industry, and Eminem would acknowledge Proof's influence over his career, stating, "There would be no me without Proof." In the preceding months before his death, Proof is said to have become more focused with his life, even quitting pills and smoking weed. On the fateful night of April 10, 2006, Proof had been bar hopping with friends, going from Coliseum to Rolex to strip clubs before finally settling at CCC in the early hours of April 11th. It wasn't unusual that he spent his late nights clubbing with friends. At CCC, he and his entourage were searched for pistols, excluding one person, Reginald "Mud" Moore, whose gun would play a role in the events of the early morning. Proof soon began to play a game of pool with Keith Bender, Jr., an Army veteran who had attended the same high school as Proof. However, it didn't take long for an altercation to break out between the two. Proof is credited with having had a short temper. Yvette Hines, who claimed to have known Proof for years, would say of him, "He always had that short temper, and even though people don't like to admit it, a lot of us knew it was only a matter of time before it eventually caught up with him." Proof and Bender were quickly separated by fellow clubgoers, including Proof's companion, Mud. According to Mud, however, this did not prevent Bender, who would still go ahead and punch Proof in the face before anyone could stop him. The ensuing event is met with discrepancy amongst eyewitnesses and police reports. However, according to Mud, due to the ongoing commotion in the club, Bender's cousin and club bouncer, Mario Etheridge, fired his pistol into the air. Proof, who knew Mud still had his gun, hassled it off Mud. Per Mud's account, Proof shot into the air just as Etheridge had done before engaging in a tussle with Bender. By the end of the commotion, both Bender and Proof were lying on the floor with gunshot wounds. Bender with a bullet in his head, and Proof in his chest and head after being shot by Etheridge. While police reports allege that Proof first shot Bender before he in turn was shot by Etheridge, Mud disagrees with this, and Proof's friends were also quick to dispel this. Rapper Horny Mac, who had also been at the scene that morning and had been subsequently shot in the hand from the drama, said, "It was effed up. P hit the guy and then his cousin fired shots in the ceiling. I do not believe P shot the man. He'd never shoot nobody unless they fired first." In the aftermath of the incident, Proof, whose jewelry had been stolen off of him at this point, was rushed by the club owners to St. John's Hospital, where Proof was pronounced dead on arrival. That morning, the media would immediately go into a frenzy and describe Proof's death as another hip-hop slang.
The service was held for Proof 8 days later after his death on April 19th, where over 2,000 mourners, including best friend Eminem and other celebrities like 50 Cent and D12, gathered at the Fellowship Chapel, Detroit. Delivering a eulogy at the service, Eminem said, "Without Proof, there would be Marshall Mathers, but there would not be an Eminem. There would not be D12, and there would not be a Slim Shady. This was a man I knew. He came to me one day when I was living in my house on the east side and threw a pair of shoes at me and said, 'Put them on.' I said, 'Why?' He said, 'Put them on your feet.' I said, 'Why?' 'Because I'm tired of you wearing those same dirty-ass shoes.'" After the funeral service, a procession followed with a horse-drawn hearse to Woodlawn Cemetery. Proof's casket, gold-plated and etched with his name on it, costed about $48,000. Rappers bemoaned the violence, with Obi Trice saying, "We're killing each other, and it's about nothing." After the funeral procession, Proof's closest friends and family gathered at the Good Life Lounge, where they threw a party in his honor, complete with the soul food spread while also playing songs by D12. Proof's shooter, Etheridge, was exonerated of his murder, but later charged and convicted with carrying a concealed weapon and discharging a firearm in an occupied structure. Bender died of his wounds days after the incident. Proof had been instrumental in fostering the rap scene in Detroit, having played an important role in the careers of Eminem and Obi Trice. Eminem would go on to eulogize his best friend with the unreleased track Difficult, which would later leak to the public. He would further mention Proof in a number of songs like Stepping Stone from his Kamikaze album, which marked the end of the D12 group. Welsh singer-songwriter Jem dedicated her song You'll Make It to the memory of Proof. She revealed that she was in Detroit at the time of the incident with Eminem's friends with whom she was recording with. Proof was survived by his wife, Sharonda, and their 5 children, and life after his death wasn't the same for his family, D12, or Eminem. Weeks after the incident, Bender's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Proof's estate, with reasons being that Proof was allegedly responsible for Bender's death. Deeming the lawsuit as wrong and insensitive, especially for Proof's family, Mudge shared his own account of the story anonymously to XXL magazine for the sake of clarity. It wasn't until October that year he gave an interview with the same magazine about his take on the whole incident. When asked about why he decided to step up months after Proof's death, he credited the lawsuit made by Bender's family as the real cause. "Sooner or later it was going to come out that I was there, so I might as well, for Proof's sake, for his family's sake, and for his kids' sake. He's got 5 kids. You want to take money from his children? You want to take money from his loved ones? From his mother? That's messed up. I felt obligated, morally. For someone I've known that long and saw him killed, I gotta say something." As for D12, the crew lost its drive and steam after Proof's death. Every member pursued their own path as solo artists, and some eventually left the music industry altogether. Eminem, on the other hand, who had been fighting addiction all his life, had it worse off after Proof's death. He would slip into certain depressive episodes, which would culminate in his methadone overdose in 2007 and full depression during his 5-year hiatus. Basically, everything took a turn for the worst, and the lives of the majority of people Proof had made an impact on, particularly Eminem. Notwithstanding, he'll continue to have a place in Eminem's success story forever. On February 3rd, 1998, Fat Pat was Houston's most promising up-and-coming rapper and set for great things. But on this fateful night, he had to make a stop at a promoter's home to pick up a paycheck. He went into an apartment block and didn't come out alive. He was shot dead, and who, why, and how are questions that were never answered. Fat Pat was born in 1970 and raised in the south side of Houston. From an early age, he had dreams of performing and gradually developed a love for hip-hop. Houston at this time wasn't really known for its hip-hop. Ghetto Boys helped change this, and their album We Can't Be Stopped was a major breakthrough for the city. However, a local artist named DJ Screw was not only making great music, but also creating beats that sounded completely different, and he invited local MCs from all over Houston to rap over them. And if you needed evidence that we live in a small world, the late George Floyd, who rapped as Big Floyd, even appeared on one of DJ Screw's tapes. Fat Pat, as well as his brother John Big Dog Hawkins, were members of what became known as the Screwed Up Clique, and these original members then went on to become the Dead End Alliance. It was a new brand of music that was about to put Houston, Texas, and the South on the map. In the 90s, hip-hop was very much fixated on the East and West Coast, but artists like Outkast and Ghetto Boys began to make waves. It became clear that Southern artists were not trying to replicate the East and West, but were coming up with a sound of their own. Southern hip-hop was presented as a third coast or Gulf Coast, and you could narrow this down to 5 major cities: Atlanta, New Orleans,
Memphis, Miami, and Houston. But DJ Screw's beats ensured that the music coming out of Houston wasn't merely Southern hip-hop, but Houston hip-hop. He introduced a new technique where he would slow down music for the entirety of the track and introduce drum kicks. This became known as the chopped and screwed sound, or screw music. This technique gave Houston its own unique sound. Alongside this new music, there was also a huge upsurge in lean culture, where cough syrup, promethazine, was used as a drug. References to drank and lean is commonplace in hip-hop today, but this new drug was particularly taking hold here in the 90s. Drinking lean and this slowed down trippy music that had more of a purple artistic take when you looked at album covers and things like that went incredibly well together, in the same way that LSD is associated with psychedelic rock or weed with reggae music. Fat Pat had released some mixtapes and appeared on tracks alongside Houston hip-hop legends such as Lil Keke, South Park Mexican, and even Ghetto Boys member Willie D and Scarface. In '97, he got signed by Rec Shop Records and began working on his debut album, Ghetto Dreams. For his debut LP, he recruited the producer Double D and also got him to rap on one of his songs, as the two had a good chemistry together. Other features on the album came from fellow Screwed Up Clique members such as Lil Keke, Big Steve, Mike D, and his brother Big Hawk. And if you wanted further evidence that we live in a small world, Fat Pat also wanted to recruit an up-and-coming R&B group in the area known as Destiny's Child, but they were unavailable. Fat Pat was expected to be the first member of the Screwed Up Clique to reach nationwide success. He worked on his album throughout '97, and it was scheduled to be released in early 1998. He was destined for great things. But on February 3rd, 1998, fate would have different plans for Fat Pat. Alongside some friends, he drove over to collect a paycheck at 10440 South Drive in Houston. He got out on his own and went to collect money from Kenneth Weasel Watson. What happened next depends on who you ask. One story is that Pat knocks on the door and gets no answer. When he realizes that Kenneth is not home, he makes his way back to the car. But when he was on his way out of the apartment building, he was shot dead by two gunmen. Another account is that Kenneth was home and he invited Pat into his apartment. And during this time, Kenneth asked Pat to call someone Pat knew who had just robbed Kenneth. While Pat was on his phone, Kenneth took out a gun and killed Pat. However, Kenneth Watson has never been found committing any crime relating to Pat's death. How Pat was killed raises a lot of questions, but why he was killed raises even more. Some allege that Fat Pat was killed by Watson, who felt that Pat had set him up to get robbed. But again, this has never been proven. Another rumor is that there was a dispute over unpaid debt. When his friends were waiting for Pat to come outside, they recall seeing two men running from the apartment. Nobody's been charged with this murder. The main suspect, Kenneth, is currently in prison for drug charges. The police obviously interrogated Kenneth, but there have been no further details on whether they believe that he was the culprit or even involved. If they did, they would have most likely pressed charges by now. Friends and family have also said that Fat Pat wasn't really living a gangster lifestyle. He was a lovable dude who happened to earn a living in music. Whatever happened on that day, the bottom line is that a young and talented man had his life cut short far too early, and he was laid to rest at the Paradise South Cemetery. 2 weeks after his murder, every rapper in Houston gathered for the release party of Ghetto Dreams, Fat Pat's first album. It sold over 20,000 copies in the first week of its release in Houston. The single Tops Drops peaked at number 10 on the Billboard Bubbling Under Hot 100 and number 5 on Hot Rap Songs. While Biggie and Tupac have countless posthumous releases, Fat Pat was different in that he did not have one single album drop during his lifetime, and it was clear that Fat Pat had talent. Top Drops is an incredible party song and has turned into a club classic in Houston ever since. Songs like Reality show a more introspective side of his, and in a particular verse he talks about the senseless violence in his area that may have even led to his own death. System got us killing each other, we supposed to love one another. The game got our minds in a headlock, but in reality we working for a jail block, will it ever stop? He's often given the label of Houston's Biggie or Houston's Tupac, and this is not just because he was gone too soon, he was also an incredibly talented rapper with a lot more to say. Like Biggie, he had incredible flows and often used R&B hooks. Like Pac, he was also prone to have introspective songs and social commentary. His second album, Thrown in the Game, was also released in 1998. A year later, fellow Screwed Up Clique member D-Rec made a documentary entitled Fat Pat Ghetto Dreams in his honor as well. 3 more albums and the Greatest Hits album have since been released. The Houston hip-hop scene was devastated by the loss of Fat Pat. However, his tragedy would not be the last. The music was all about sipping, drank, and lean, and this drug was finally taking its toll on the Screwed Up Click. On November 16th of 2000, DJ Click was found dead inside his Houston recording studio. His death was believed to have come from a codeine overdose. In 2006, another incident would add a further layer of heartbreak to the Houston hip-hop scene. Fat Pat's brother, Big Hawk, was also murdered. And just like his brother, he was murdered under mysterious circumstances. The Houston hip-hop community was devastated once again, and John would join his brother Pat at the Paradise South Cemetery. Fellow Houston rapper Paul Wall said, "It's gotta either be a case of mistaken identity or an attempted robbery by somebody who didn't realize who they were robbing." Hawk was all about positivity and bringing people together. Bun B from UGK said, "There were no chinks in this man's moral armor. Because he was a rapper, there will be people who will take his death the wrong way, but he was a peaceful guy and a family man who had no beefs with anybody." For the family, there are now not one, but two family members with unexplained murders, and nobody has been brought to justice. But the legacy from Fat Pat and the Screwed Up Click lives on. As we touched upon earlier, Fat Pat's Top Drops continues to be a party anthem in Houston. Megan Thee Stallion is from Houston, and despite only being 2 or 3 years old when he was murdered, cites Fat Pat as one of her idols. Her song Freaky Girls samples 25 Lighters, a song Fat Pat was featured on. The Screwed Up Click has had a bigger influence on Travis Scott, who was 6 years old when Fat Pat passed away. Like Megan, Travis sampled 25 Lighters for his song Can't Say. Drive also features a sample of Fat Pat's So Real, the Screwed version. The sound that Travis Scott has crafted is definitely indebted to DJ Screw and the Screwed Up Click, at least partially. Even outside of hip-hop, UFC fighter and Houston native Derek Lewis has used Fat Pat's hit Top Drops as his entrance music. As of today, Fat Pat's murder and his brother's remain unsolved, but his legacy in southern hip-hop and in the city of Houston, meanwhile, is undisputed. He was at the peak of his DJ career, making a massive difference in helping shape hip-hop when his life was tragically taken away from him. Scott LaRock, a member of Boogie Down Productions, was born on March 2nd, 1962 in South Ozone Park, Queens. It was a rather peaceful neighborhood, far from the grim and gloomy place that would mold Scott later in his life. His early childhood was not as bright as his parents split when he was only 4 years old. After that, he was living with his mother, Carolyn Moran, a career municipal employee. Later, with his mother, Scott moved to the Morrisania section of the Bronx, and after that to Morris Heights. Scott was attending Our Savior Lutheran High School, where he was a successful student, not only in his academic pursuits, but in sports as well. He graduated in 1980 and started his education at Vermont's Castleton State College. He was a part of the college's basketball team, but it soon became evident that he didn't have a future in the NBA. So, Scott switched his focus from basketball to music. A roommate of Scott LaRock, Lee the Mag Smith Jr., stated that, "Our turntables were on our desks and our books were on the floor. I would come home and hear the bass before I opened the door." In 1984, after graduating from college, Scott LaRock came back to New York in hopes of finding work and finding his way into the music industry. Thanks to the help of his mother, Scott was given a job at the Franklin Armory Men's Shelter, which was on 166th Street in the Bronx. Having a day job didn't stop him from his musical endeavors, in which he was progressing playing in the Broadway Repertoire Theater on 145th Street. Thanks to his developed social skills, progressive business sense, and pure magic that he was making on the turntables, Scott LaRock earned a reputation. DJ Red Alert, while asked about Scott, said, "He was just a smooth, approachable brother. He could relate to any type of person. That's why so many people gravitated to him." The more Scott worked on the turntables, the more he wanted to make his own. So he began studying the art of making beats at his friend Sed G's space and looking for a worthy MC partner in numerous clubs. But when he did find the better half of the later duo, it was not in the clubs, but right in the shelter where he was working. Among the numerous responsibilities that Scott had at the shelter was giving away subway tokens to those who were traveling to job interviews. It took him some time to figure out that a few of the residents were not going to any job interviews, but instead were saving those tokens to go to parties. One time, Scott confronted one of the said people, and it was rather loud. There was some verbal altercation that resulted in the resident being forced from the premises of the shelter. That man was KRS-One, 20 years old at the time, with a cocky attitude and passion for graffiti and philosophy. A few months after that incident, Scott ran into KRS-One again when he was visiting his friend Sed G. KRS was there to practice his newfound passion for music. Having in mind their previous verbal exchange,
Scott suggested burning the hatchet and inviting KRS-One to be his partner. After that, Scott asked KRS to come to one of his parties in the Broadway Repertoire Theater. My mind got blown clean out of my head. Just seeing Scott DJing and then watching Mantronics walk by and then Dougie Fresh in the corner grabbing a drink, it was just too much for me. Scott really liked KRS and two more guys from the shelter he was working at, such as Just Ice and ICU later. LaRock tried to be an influence on D-Nice, who was a cousin of a security guard. So I brought my cousin food over at the Franklin Men's Shelter. He was like, yo, I want to introduce you to someone. He took me into his office and introduced me to this guy. He was just this tall, dark, towering dude. I was young at the time. I was 15. Even at work, this dude always had a briefcase and short sleeve shirt on, always wearing jeans, white pair of Nikes on, waves in his hair, smiling. He was just full of life and energy. And from that day, we hung out and we went to Dr. J's on 3rd Avenue in the Bronx, and he just started buying me stuff. It was how D-Nice was introduced to Boogie Down Productions. Scott encouraged D-Nice to take his chances in hip-hop, even though D-Nice at the time did not have the same visualization of things as Scott had. Also, Scott was trying to persuade D-Nice to spend some time educating himself. In a 1987 interview, KRS-One recalled that,
Scott worked for the Franklin Men's Shelter, and me and BDP Posse was in there, bugging, running around LA. We wasn't like everybody else. We wasn't, most of the people you see inside shelters are usually, they're there because of the bottle, the crack, the needle, whatever it is, they're there for a reason. We were there simply because no one else would believe in us, family-wise.
He'd invite us down, and we'd hang out way past the 9 p.m. curfew, get drunk and party. At the end of the night, Scott would take us all out for breakfast, and we'd talk about who we were going to be and what we were going to do. Scott gained freedom hanging out with us, and being around him made us feel important. The charismatic trio, which consisted of Scott LaRock, KRS-One, and D-Nice, first called themselves Scott LaRock and Celebrity 3, but later changed their name to Boogie Down Productions to honor their home, Boogie Down Bronx. It was the fall in 1985 when Scott LaRock and KRS started recording original music, while the trio was called Scott LaRock and Celebrity 3. They released a single, Advance, that wasn't too successful. After that, Scott saw an ad in the newspaper that Rock Candy Company was looking for a rap talent and decided to give it a try. He met with Rock Candy and sold them the idea of having a subsidiary label, B-Boy Records, that would be run by him and KRS. They would have an office in the Hunt's Point neighborhood in the Bronx and later change their name to Boogie Down Productions, splitting profits equally. Scott and KRS started their recording instantly, making a demo cassette with rough versions of Elementary and Criminal Minded just in a few weeks. Through an engineer in Power Play Studios, Scott had an opportunity to give the tape to DJ Mr. Magic, but Magic didn't really like the material and said it was kinda whack. Later that same week, Scott booked 2 hours at the studio, where KRS set his creative energy free, inspired by that insult. That was how South Bronx was born, a track about regional pride that took shots at DJ Mr. Magic, DJ Marley Marl, Queens, and Juice Crew. I hear all these records about Brooklyn and Queens, and then Shan saying that rap music started in Queens. That's a bunch of bull. I don't like Mr. Magic anyway, so I thought it was time to tell the truth. Then Scott and KRS released Success Is the Word through Sleeping Bag Records, but they didn't write it or produce it through Boogie Down Productions, so it didn't really have much of an influence. Their rage took the shape of The Bridge Is Over and South Bronx. Mr. Magic tried to diss us one night in the studio a couple months ago, so I said, KRS, let's put out this record. Chris Lighty, who was the leader of Violator, you may also know him as the manager for 50 Cent who helped him get the vitamin water deal, remembered when Scott played him South Bronx for the first time. I was like, damn, we going at him like that? He was just like, yeah, why not? It's a business. What's stopping us? It seemed like an insurmountable mountain at that point, but that was how Scott was. He could make you believe anything was possible. Soon after, Scott and KRS were in the final stages of making their first album, Criminal Minded. It was Said G who helped to craft a revolutionary sound. Me and Scott grew up together, Said told Angus Beatty in 2004. I knew Scott's whole family. With BDP's Criminal Minded, my input was more of showing Scott how to use the sampler. When the SP12 came out, a lot of engineers just looped, but I would take sounds and chop them up. Even if it wasn't a full sound, I'd make it sound full. I was the first person to chop samples on the SP12. Soon after, everyone was doing it.
KRS-One would bring the record, I would take it, chop it, rearrange it. I did the whole album, apart from 4 songs. For listeners, KRS shaped and described the reality of the Bronx's crack era mean streets. He rapped about what one needs to do to get money, but at the same time not to cross the line and become criminals themselves. KRS vividly depicted the album cover in one of his interviews in 2010. The idea was revolutionaries. If you look at the cover of Criminal Minded, that's what we were saying modern day Black Panthers are. I had the gun belt going over the shoulder, grenades. That wasn't hood. It wasn't like we had guns on the table like we were drug dealers. We had grenades. Real paramilitary stuff was on the table. We were showing ourselves to be revolutionaries. Gangsters are really intelligent. We're Black Panthers. We're not just dudes on the corner.
The guns and all that.
The guns and stuff. We were posing on the cover of Criminal Minded as revolutionaries. We were coming off Black Panther, coming off of guerrilla warfare, but we doing it in the hood.
D-Nice, while being a member of Boogie Down Productions, was not on the cover of Criminal Minded for a very good reason. He had a lot of disputes with Scott about continuing his education. So Scott put it very simply, D-Nice could not find the inspiration to go to school, so he didn't deserve his place to be in the group. At the beginning of 1987, Criminal Minded was finally released and was met with immediate acclaim, selling about 300,000 copies in the first year of its release. Though Rock Candy turned out not to be the decent partners and they didn't distribute the album properly, there were lots of shady things happening with the album's true sales. So Scott and KRS never really realized or got the exact amount of money that they should have received. Warner Brothers A&R Benny Medina got really interested in the album, so in August, Medina flew Scott and KRS to LA and presented them with $275,000 to sign to the major. Understandably, when Scott and KRS returned to New York, they were really excited and more than ready to announce their move to Madison Square Garden, where they had to perform alongside Public Enemy, LL Cool J, as a part of the Dope Jam tour. Also, they began pre-production of the following tracks, such as My Philosophy, Stop the Violence, and I'm Still Number One for their next album, By All Means Necessary. On the evening of August 26th, D-Nice was having some trouble in the Highbridge Hood in the Bronx, where popular modern-day rapper A-Boogie with the Hoodie is from, when he was walking with a friend. In a moment, his friend was gone, and D-Nice was surrounded by a lot of not-so-friendly people. One of those people was the guy with whom D-Nice had a prior conflict. That guy pulled a gun and stuck it to D-Nice's face. Rightfully fearing for his life, he called Scott and asked for help. He said, "Yo, I'm gonna come over there and we're gonna find him and we're gonna squash the beef." He was a social worker. His job was to end beef and help solve issues. Prior to that evening, Scott LaRock, KRS, Just Ice, their manager Scotty Morris, and RoboCop, the bodyguard, were in McDonald's on the corner of Broadway and 72nd Street. They finalized the deal earlier that day to produce through Boogie Down Productions and Just Ice's Cool and Deadly album. After we signed the contract, we went to McDonald's. It was all of us, plus RoboCop was with us. They got a call from their young friend and affiliate D-Nice who needed help. RoboCop was like, "We gonna go up there and I'm gonna go get D-Nice." Scott was like, "I'm gonna go with you." Before going straight to the hood, Scott called Lighty and the Violators for some muscle. Two crews met in the South Bronx and then drove to University Avenue, which was between 165th and 166th Street. Despite the person who was threatening D-Nice being nowhere to be seen, his crew was hanging on the block. RoboCop, who was in the car with Scott, went forward and started asking questions about whether the person of interest was there and if anyone saw him. Things turned hostile at the moment, and RoboCop found himself in an altercation with one of the youth and slammed him on the sidewalk. Scott LaRock came close and calmed everything down, and then was on his way back to the car. Lighty, who was observing the whole situation, remembered that it seemed like it was mellow. Well, as mellow as some kids that just got smacked up can be. Then, Scott and RoboCop were walking back to the car, and gunfire starts, from the ground level, and it seemed like from a couple levels up too. While it was not really clear who was shooting at them and from where, Violators returned fire, giving time for RoboCop and Scott to jump into the car. According to RoboCop, they were driving, and all of a sudden, Scott grabbed his neck and fell down. His head hit the mother effing dashboard, and you see a hole, and it was a .22. That's what you call a lucky shot, man. If you've ever been to Webster Projects, those buildings are like 17 to 20 stories high. He was on the roof, and he shot him with the little .22. If the wind blows too hard, it'll knock it off course. That day, there was no wind. They tried to get away from the neighborhood as soon as possible, but traffic was jammed due to the shooting. But after some time, they finally made their way to the Lincoln Memorial Hospital and carried Scott LaRock into the emergency room. He was admitted at 11:15 p.m. while bleeding and speaking incoherently. The violators with their leader arrived around 20 minutes later, unaware of who was hit. When we got there and saw him, it was like watching your own father pass away. Around 2 a.m., Scott completely lost consciousness. In an hour, the doctors declared that he was brain dead, so Scott's mother decided to take him off life support, but not until 5 p.m. the following day so that all his friends would have time to say their goodbyes. MC Setch remembered that day vividly, saying, "He was laying there with his shirt off, with this white towel draped over him, and his arms were out. His wife was on one side and his mother on the other. They were both holding his hands. He was laid out like Jesus on the cross. Both eyes were partially open, and he had tears streaming down his face. Just tears rolling out of both of his eyes. I grabbed his hand, told him how much he meant to me, and he had a nervous reaction like he was grabbing my hand. I lost it. I started bawling. It was like he was trying to tell me so many different things all at once. To me, his body was still holding on." It was August 27, 1987 when Scott LaRock died. It was almost a year later when a few teens in the Bronx were busted by the police for stealing subway tickets. Kendall Newland and Corey Bain were arrested and charged with the murder of Scott LaRock. Newland was living in the apartment building near where the shooting took place. Police officers were puzzled by the lack of witnesses that wanted to testify, so both of them were acquitted at trial on November 15, 1989. From that moment, they were in the wind. Despite that, after Scott's death, Warner Brothers withdrew their contract offer, and Boogie Down Productions found a better place for their music, with Jive Records. Although KRS was then left without his partner, he didn't give up and continued what he started with Scott, though he shifted the lyrics' focus to elevating black consciousness and denouncing the violence.
We all planned our goals. We knew exactly what it is we wanted to do, where it is we wanted to go, and I feel, in a way, us as a group, we don't mourn. We had our chance for mourning. You know, you have that one day, you cry it out, and then that's it. You know, we don't mourn and keep going and keep going, keep going. You know, you celebrate, if anything, you know, because we're advancing constantly, you know what I mean? If we had flopped, then I would be sad that Scott's gone and my career went down the drain and this and that. His son will live what he doesn't have materially, so everything's straight.
The relationship between KRS and D-Nice was never the same because KRS held D-Nice guilty of Scott's death. KRS and I weren't really tight like that. And there's part of me that, although I wanted my brother to understand and see who I am, I couldn't be mad at KRS because Scott was the man who pulled me into the group. KRS never knew what the story was. All he knew now was Scott was dead because he came to my aid. Boogie Down Productions, after some time, resumed the work on the album By All Means Necessary, which was released in 1988. It was again a commercial success and drew even more attention than Criminal Minded. Stop the Violence was the track that KRS used to talk about all the senseless killings that kept happening in his community, including what happened to Scott. Stop the Violence was a freestyle because every time we went to do a show, somebody would start acting stupid. We would have something to say, even as that was going on, because the music never stopped. Scott's death was a push that made KRS promote peace and unity in hip-hop. In 1989, KRS banded together with a lot of stars to record the song Self-Destruction, which was a tribute to Scott LaRock and an important moment in hip-hop. But arguably, the worst situation is that he never got his justice. Lil Mosey was finally found not guilty in a case that has been haunting him for the past 2 years. This now leaves him at a point where he has to scramble and pick up the pieces of a career that was put on ice during that time. Lil Mosey rose to fame as a young teenager, living the life most teenagers could only dream of. He was born in Mount Lake Terrace, Washington in 2002, and he moved to Seattle when he was only 2 years old and raised by his mother. However, despite his strong Seattle roots, he doesn't really have too much of a fondness for the city. In Seattle, the music, I'm really the only one making it out there. But other than that, there's nothing going on in Seattle. He would later retract that statement and say it was taken out of context. He started rapping at a young age, but his older brother gave him an inspiration to start making his own music. His brother stole his iPod for a few days, and when Mosey got it back, his brother added Meek Mill's Dreams and Nightmares to it, which inspired Mosey to start making his own music. When I got into music, I just started watching how people were really living. I started falling in love with that high life, what the lifestyle could be like. It's legal, so I was like, this is a good way for me to live my dreams. So I said, if they could do it, I could do it too. So I just did it. Started getting better. Everything you do, you got to put 100% into. If you don't put 100% into it, it's not going to work out like you want it to. I did that every day at home, woke up, went to school late, left school early, and just went home, started working. If I wasn't working, then I wasn't making money. For years, he wanted to drop out of school, but his mother wouldn't let him. He even struck a deal with her saying that if his first music video got 30K views in 3 days, he would drop out. Despite succeeding in that attempt, his mother still wouldn't allow him to skip class. Mosey posted one of his first songs, Off-White, to SoundCloud in 2016, which received 50,000 plays in a short period of time. With So Bad and Off-White accumulating him followers on SoundCloud, and also appearing on his mixtape North's Best, he would give a couple of live performances in the early days, and even sometimes having to pay to take the stage. In November of 2016, he performed at Coast to Coast Live, which was a good experience for him. And then the life-changing success was going to come from the song Pull Up when he was only 15 years old. The song was picked up by the hip-hop blog Elevator and quickly racked up millions of views since premiering on December 7th, 2017 through their YouTube channel. The song became a hit, showcasing his unique sound and style, as well as the novelty of how young he looked. He looked far younger than 15. And we covered this and how he got on Elevator and World Star as well on the video called The Dark Side of Lil Mosey, so I won't get into too many details on that. You can watch that. Some people were calling him a mumble rapper, but he just said that's the way he talks. I wouldn't consider myself a mumble rapper because I don't know what that is. But when I talk, I mumble. So it's in my music because that's how I talk. I'm not going for that sound. Soon, Mosey would leave high school in the 10th grade and move to LA to pursue his music dreams with his mom's blessing. She didn't want me to. It took a minute to convince her. I was telling her, trust me, it's going to work out. I started to convince her. Really, I just had to tell her, I know you don't want me to go, but I'ma just go because I got you. I'ma let you know it's going to work out. I know it's going to work out. And then she let me go, and I just left. Pull Up was included in his full-length album North's Best in 2018, which made its debut in the top 30 of the Billboard 200, so not too great after his first come up, but this was his first actual project being put out. But then, he was going to put out the music video and song for his second hit, Noticed, which would peak at number 80 on Billboard's Hot 100. In 2019, he released a single G-Walk with Chris Brown from his upcoming second album or official first album, Certified Hitmaker. As a follow-up, he released Stuck in a Dream featuring Gunna, which that song overtook Noticed, peaking at number 62, now his highest charting song ever. In 2020, though, after being leaked on Spotify throughout 2019 and accumulating tens of millions of streams on several different leaks, Mosey finally released his single Blueberry Faygo. The song was a hit before it even came out, and instantly when it dropped, it took off, gaining traction and becoming popular, eventually tying with Stuck in a Dream at number 62, but later it would become the song with the highest peak ever for Lil Mosey, peaking at number 8 in the top 10 of the Hot 100, as well as peaking in different international charts and becoming a widespread TikTok hit turned into legitimate hit. In 2020, he also put out a few joint projects, Top Gone with WhipNae-Nae and Back at It with Lil Baby. The latter song former President Barack Obama put on his 2020 summer playlist. Yeah, I'm just a little ass kid and a grown ass president know about me. That's crazy. 2020 was a relatively busy year for Mosey despite the pandemic. He was one of the few rappers who was doing well since his music had blown up while it was going on. Otherwise, it might have been lights out if he was unable to do any shows, because his career was a little bit dead, to say the least. Unfortunately, though, it was a double-edged sword because he wasn't able to capitalize on it in the same way if things weren't locked down. He was working on a new mixtape called Universal. That mixtape was supposed to serve as a bridge between Certified Hitmaker and his third project, The Land of Make-Believe. In October 1st, 2020, Mosey released a YouTube video on his channel celebrating the world premiere of FIFA 21 while performing a bunch of his songs. He also had a deal to make a song for the SpongeBob movie. And he also collaborated with Internet Money on the song Jet Ski, which was supposed to serve and take off as a hit. It was a great song featuring Lil Tecca, but unfortunately, it wasn't able to be promoted in the way that it should have. It was going to be his biggest hit since Blueberry Faygo. It already was, looking at the numbers. But Mosey looked promising at this point. He had a quick rise to fame, fell off, and then having the biggest hit of his life, the newest highest peak of his career. But soon it was all going to go downhill. Because on April 2nd, 2021, Mosey was charged with 1 count of second-degree SA in Lewis County, Washington. He was charged for engaging with an individual that was incapable of giving consent. He pled not guilty, and the charge arose from an alleged incident that happened at a cabin in Randall, Washington, where he had hosted a party on the night of January 5th, 2020. He was still a minor at the time. A girl claimed that she and a friend went to a cabin to see Mosey, but ended up being SA'd by him and another man. He wasn't an adult at the time, and he was facing the maximum sentence, which was life in prison. In the affidavit that was obtained by TMZ, one of the alleged victims claimed that she agreed to engage in this activity with Mosey in a car, but she says that after drinking White Claws and champagne, she passed out in the cabin afterwards. She claimed that shortly after, while he was with her, Mosey pushed up and climbed on her, and then she recalled experiencing leg muscle pain as Mosey was pushing her. She stated that after a second blackout, she awoke to another man, which was Lil Mosey's friend, forcing himself on her. The woman claims that she was hurt, including having bruises on her inner knee, neck, and arm, and she further asserted that she received a message from a partygoer stating that the guys were discussing, quote, training 2 girls. In 2021, a $50,000 arrest warrant was issued for Mosey because he had failed to show up for a scheduled preliminary appearance in court the week before. His defense attorney, Jennifer Atwood, said that the court summons were sent to an address where Mosey hadn't lived at in 5 years, and he didn't know until after he'd missed the court date. The trial was delayed several times, but it started on February 22nd, 2023, nearly 2 years after. During this entire time, 2 years, he wasn't able to work with any other rappers or artists, sparingly released any music in 2022, took nearly a year off. 2021, after this allegation, he really didn't put anything out, and the only thing that people thought of when his name was even mentioned was this case. Many people distanced themselves, and on March 3rd, 2023, the jury cleared him of all charges. After the verdict, he shared his relief with his followers on Instagram. Following these allegations against Mosey in 2021, he took a 3-month break from music before making a comeback with How I Been and Problem Solving. He's released a few singles in the last 2 years, including Falling, Pass Out, and Not the Same God as Mine. None of the new songs, though, managed to stick with a wider audience, which is potentially understandable. He is on a massive record label, Interscope, and they probably wanted to wait until he was cleared of these charges or see what happened with them before putting a lot of money into promotion. Lil Mosey experienced incredible success in an industry that's constantly changing, and the ability to remain relevant is crucial to long-term success. So when you disappear for 2 years, you can have the effect that it had on Rich Homie Quan, which he's still yet to be able to recover from. But despite his initial success, his sound, image, mainly legal issues, and brand have struggled in the past couple of years. Fortunately for Lil Mosey, Trippie Redd was the first person, and he's got to be given a lot of credit for this, to embrace him and show him love publicly after this case, bringing him out during his set at Rolling Loud, which presented a new problem that I hadn't even considered before. Lil Mosey's voice sounds completely different. The majority of the music we've heard, his voice was higher pitched. He was a young teen, and it went well with the melodies. Even Blueberry Faygo was clearly recorded years before it released. But now, with his voice much, much deeper, I wonder how that will affect the music he tries to put out in the future. But if there's one thing that we all owe him, it's a genuine listen and opportunity to win us over again with the new music or project he's working on now. There's always that saying that death and taxes are the only 2 things that are certain. But this definitely applies to rappers. Music generates a lot of money, and the genre seems to be just as popular, actually more popular than it was 20 years ago. So more cash, more taxes, And that's where an artist has to decide whether to play by the rules or take some risks and participate in shady activity. The Puerto Rican, New York, also Cuban rapper Fat Joe got caught up in a similar situation and practically went broke after having been a millionaire. Fat Joe's been around for more than 3 decades, being one of the last few rappers from the 90s to still be around in 2023 and somewhat active. He started his career under the moniker Fat Joe the Gangster back in around 1992, and around 93 got his first record deal with Relativity Records, and later that year he released his debut record named Represent. One of the songs from the album managed to make it to the top of the rap charts, taking Joe's career to the next level. By his third album, Fat Joe already had recognition from hip-hop fans, and his projects were supported by features from some of the biggest rappers in the game like Nas, Diddy, Ja Rule, Ludacris, Ashanti, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and more. So Fat Joe decided to set his eyes on expanding, and later that year he debuted his own label, The Terror Squad, which was also a group consisting of Big Pun, Cuban Link, Armageddon, Remy Ma, Triple Seis, and Prospect. Throughout the years, Fat Joe would release music once every 2 to 3 years and had moderate success, becoming, in his own words, more and more of a big boy financially. Fat Joe also embraced other forms of the entertainment business, starring in a couple of movies and making appearances in commercials. In 2005, he landed his biggest hit, Lean Back, with the Terror Squad group. From 2005 on, Fat Joe's name was often mentioned by hip-hop fans, not only due to his music, but also due to his famous beef with another rapper, 50 Cent, which certainly boosted his popularity. By the beginning of the 2010s, Fat Joe was already considered more of a rap veteran who was respected and recognized for his contribution, but Fat Joe was in the position the majority of musicians would love to be in. He had fame, acknowledgement, respect, and he pretty much transitioned into generational wealth for his family. However, there was one big issue with Fat Joe's assets. He didn't really control them. The thing is, Fat Joe, just like almost any other person who had relative success in the business, had a business manager or personal accountant managing his funds. Joe's CPA was responsible for various operations with the rapper's money, like creating budget reports, conducting audits, and of course, paying taxes. As Joe said, I was wiring him money to pay for all my mortgages, cars, my taxes. $25,000, $40,000, $50,000. Big money. This accountant had been working with Fat Joe for a couple of years until one particular day in 2012. Fat Joe went to the car dealership to get a new car. It was a regular thing, especially considering that at the time he was already almost 2 decades into his career. However, this time things didn't go the way Fat Joe expected. In his own words, the car dealer comes to me and says, "Here, you haven't paid for your houses, your mortgages. Here, you haven't paid for your car." I was like, "Are you crazy? Are you nuts?" So I called up my accountant, and he was like, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." I said, "I never threatened you, bro." At that point, it was obvious that something shady was happening, and things got clearer as Fat Joe checked the transactions made on his behalf by his CPA, and it turned out that none of them were actually involving taxes. The first thing that came to Joe's mind was that it was some kind of a Ponzi scheme. He called his accountant out, asking him where his money went if it wasn't used for paying taxes. Obviously, Joe was pissed at the situation, very uncomfortable, although the accountant came to the dealership later and happened to have enough cash on him to pay the car off right away to settle things down. In Joe's words, he had an incredible credit score prior to this situation, to the point where he could even get the whole building on credit. The next day, Fat Joe contacted his other accountant, who checked all the transaction information, and it turned out that Joe's CPA hadn't paid taxes for a whole 2 years. An estimated tax loss to the government stood at around $718,000. The situation was difficult, to say the least, and there weren't many right choices for Fat Joe. What made this whole scandal even more confusing for him is that, in his own words, "That was the one time when I didn't do the crime. I've done many crimes, I'm not gonna lie to you, but that's the one time I didn't do the crime. That was the craziest thing to ever happen." Fat Joe did, arguably, what was best for him in the situation and decided to contact the IRS directly and tell them everything about what happened. He explained the situation and was ready to show all the evidence to support the claim that his accountant was the only one to blame. The next day, the feds came to Fat Joe's house. He wasn't home at the time, but his wife called him and told him that there were numerous agents who wanted to talk to him. She put the feds on the phone and they had a conversation with Joe. It was obvious about the taxes, and they wanted to see Fat Joe in person. He tried to explain the situation, although it didn't really help, and he decided to contact his lawyer. Eventually, he did meet the feds in person and showed them the wire transfers, transactions, and stuff like that. However, their verdict was that Joe, as the head of his household, so he was the one responsible for it. In the end, Fat Joe managed to prove that there was no malicious intent on his part, and that there were no serious felonies like conspiracy thrown into the mix. Instead, Joe was given 2 misdemeanors that translated into 2 years of jail time or probation. I did everything I possibly can to correct the situation. I paid them back. It wasn't entirely my fault. I had a new accountant for like the last 4 years. And then you could see that my accountant that worked for me for the 15 years prior to that always paid my stuff on time. Always had it on time. The thing is, Joe actually had to pay the sum twice, since earlier he gave money to his CPA, who turned out to be a fraud, and then Fat Joe had to pay the same amount once again. This time around, it was about $1.25 million, and he should have paid it even before the court hearing took place. As Fat Joe said, in a situation like this, when the FBI gets involved, it's rare to see anyone vouching for a defendant, as it usually gets people hot, and no one wants to get involved in that kind of business. However, Fat Joe's case was different. As he said, there were thousands of letters sent by people to whom he donated money and other things. One of these people was a guy named Terrence. He was in prison at the time, and his parents weren't able to see his kids due to traveling and their constant moving out. Fat Joe bought Terrence's family a whole bus that helped them optimize their schedule. There were a lot of people from Santo Domingo who were vouching for Joe, and all of their letters were about what a good person he was to them and things of that matter. Fat Joe's entire family was present at the court, regardless of the long distance between the place where the hearing took place and their home. Even those uncles who never leave their cribs were there. Even the judge was impressed with the public reaction, saying that Joe was indeed a great, remarkable guy, although she had to give him that time. Eventually, Fat Joe was given 4 months in prison and another $1 million in penalties, even though he had already paid the entire sum at that point, plus a year of supervised release. Add to this around $700,000 in court expenses, and you'll get an idea of how big of trouble he was in, even considering Fat Joe was a millionaire at that point in his career. Also, it turned out that Fat Joe's accountant actually stole the money he was to pay as taxes, and eventually he told on people higher than him who were in charge of this operation. He probably went under protection, so Fat Joe couldn't even try to sue him to get his money back. After he was released, he went touring all around the globe to cover the money that he lost, going to countries like Yugoslavia, Poland, different African countries, China, and the Philippines. In his own words, he was busting his ass, working hard, and did everything so his family wouldn't even realize that there was an issue. However, for Fat Joe, it wasn't that easy of a ride, and it was difficult for him to adjust to this situation. They took my money. There was a time when I got a $10 million deal. I'm hanging out every day with 50 dudes that didn't deserve it. Lobsters and champagne every night. We up in Jimmy's, cracking 100 bottles a night. We on G4s. I'm taking bums on G4s. Buying 20 Cadillac trucks, cracking 100 bottles, and I don't even drink. And then I go to the bank where I got $50,000 in cash every day for 2 years straight like it's a joke. I walk one day here and the woman says, "Oh, Mr. Joe, something must be wrong. There's no money in the bank." I said, "What?" And I got this tight butterflies, like I felt like I want to vomit. I felt a freaking dolphin. I had a hole in my head. I walked out of there zombied out. Joe proceeded to hustle even harder, going as far as collecting old debts from his friends, acquaintances, and others. Luckily for me, a couple of people owed me money, and we shook them upside down. We was taking them MFs up, flipping them upside down. We managed to get $200,000 to $280,000 out of people on the streets, and at that point, I was like, whoa, breathe a little bit, buddy. So money can run out. I try to tell that people all the time, no matter how much money you've got, it can run out. And trying to collect it, because I was doing it very aggressive. No matter who it was, either my friend or my boy, they had to know that my ribs were touching. Eventually, Fat Joe admitted to being in the wrong in that situation and was more careful with his choice of personal accounts. There was a lot going on in the years that I didn't file my taxes, but it was my responsibility, he said. Sadly, it didn't prevent another situation a couple of years later with another accounting firm called BDO. The firm was literally stealing money from Joe's bank accounts, creating Amex accounts on behalf of his wife, and making unauthorized purchases totaling $40,000, which included Uber rides and Uber Eats deliveries, as well as tuition payments for Vanessa Rodriguez's daughter, who was one of the CPAs at that firm. According to Joe, there were numerous delinquent and unpaid mortgage and bill payments. Also, one of Fat Joe's entities, Sneaker Addict Tours, was missing substantial payments totaling more than $300,000. He claimed that similar problems occur with other organizations and high-paid athletes like Jose Iglesias of the Colorado Rockies, Luis Garcia of the Houston Astros, and former Chicago White Sox player Dion Viciendo. He filed a suit in the fall of 2022 against BDO, and there's an ongoing court battle between the two sides. Having to deal with so many frauds through his career, I mean, he did say he was a robber at one point in his life. It looks like that came back around with people robbing him. Fat Joe had this advice to share with people. Listen, artists, listen. From the young ones to the old ones. If stuff like that happens to Fat Joe, everybody in the game who has an accountant should be alert. You need to check your money yourself, because these people start thinking that your money is their money. If it's happening to Fat Joe, it's happening to you right now. If you're not watching your account, you're playing yourself. If you heard a phone ring in 2007, there's a good chance you would hear it to the tune of "Ay Baby" by Hurricane Chris. The rapper thrived in the ringtone market in the late 2000s, but then felt the wrath of the fickle music industry. More recently, he was just facing a murder charge and 20 plus years behind bars. Let's take a look back at April 10th, 2007. Before the trap sound of southern rap was in total domination mode, back when another southbound subgenre of rap called crunk was the turn-up style that included loud call-and-response choruses yelled out over thick bass lines, layers of synthesizer keys, and big drum machine claps. Crunk was popularized by plenty of well-known rap acts like Memphis trio 3 6 Mafia, Atlanta DJ and producer Lil Jon, and others. This niche genre became mainstream with hits such as Right There by Chingy and Slow Motion by Juvenile featuring Soulja Slim. Then everybody and anybody heard of Yeah by Usher alongside Lil Jon and Ludacris. A big part of this movement was also Hurricane Chris, who was named after his hurricane-like rap cadence. His debut single "Ay Baby" was really the anthem of sweaty dance floor partygoers in the South. The phrase "Ay Baby" came from a chant a local club used to introduce Hurricane Chris's DJ. It peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and number 3 on the rap charts. It blew up big enough to demand a remix that was overflowing with guest vocals from Jadakiss, The Game, E40, Lil Boosie, and Angie Loke. There were even artists other than Hurricane Chris who made their own remixes of "Ay Baby" to catch some shine from the song's heat. From "Ay Baby" onward, Hurricane Chris's wave was soaring higher and higher as he went on to work with other producers like Atlanta's Mr. Collie Park, who was known for his work with the Ying Yang Twins. During the 2000s, a major get-rich revenue stream was the sale of popular songs shortened into ringtones. And with the rise of music streaming, ringtones provided an entirely new cash cow for artists, music streaming being illegal pirated music at this point in time. For Chris, this newfound fame was a lot to take in. I think it happened so fast that I didn't even get a chance to realize what was going on. They picked me up from Shreveport, Louisiana, and nobody knew who I was. Within a month of being on the tour bus, I'm stopping at hotel rooms and my video is on TV every time we look at a TV, or every time we turn on the radio. I'm on the radio. It was a lot for a youngster. Then there was the official "Ay Baby" music video that rose up to number 1 on BET's 106 & Park TV show. Chris's mixtape "Louisianimal" would come out in 2007, August, alongside his full-length album 5150 Ratchet in October 2007 that would be underwhelming in terms of chart position at number 24 on the Billboard 200 charts. Along with follow-up singles "The Hand Clap" and "Plays Rock," it looked like nothing but glory days were potentially ahead for Hurricane Chris if he was able to make a comeback on this massive hit. However, the chaotic, uncontrollable nature of fame was something Hurricane Chris, who was only 18 years old the day his debut album came out, would struggle with. When he was around 17, 18, he said he was driving a Lamborghini Gallardo, but since the insurance was crazy expensive, he would let it go. Chris even stated that he blew right through $300,000 to $400,000 in a single month. Instead of getting stuck in this phase of easy come, easy go, he started investing in real estate, which included his decision to purchase 2 halfway houses. He would tell Vice, "I did that and I had 2 halfway houses, like for rehabilitating people who were coming home from jail. It was really something I wanted to do to help the community and be able to help people that was going through their situation because I had a father who did jail time. He came home, and our focus was to get him back on his feet and up and running. So that really made me want to help people coming home because it's real hard. When you're coming home with a criminal history to get back productive and into society, you can't get a job and people look down on you. There was a 2-year gap between Hurricane's first album in 2007 and his sophomore album, Unleashed, dropping on December 21st, 2009. It was released on the Polo Grounds record label, distributed through J Records, founded by old school music industry mogul Clive Davis. Polo Grounds has had a whole lot of success in the rap game, from A$AP Rocky and the whole crew, Pitbull, Yo Gotti, and even Young Jock. Despite the track record of this label though, Hurricane Chris's second album would be a massive fall off. With Unleashed, Hurricane would drop his first single, the track Halle Berry, named after the Hollywood actress. For the remix to Halle Berry, he followed the first formula of the single, Hey Baby, piled on a large list of special guests, everyone from Pitbull, Ludacris, Yo Gotti, Young Jock, and a couple of others. Despite sticking to the same formula, the numbers weren't looking as good as the first hit. While Hey Baby peaked at number 7, Halle Berry peaked at number 52. 5150 Ratchet debuted at number 24, where as far as I can tell, Unleashed only appeared in Billboard's hip-hop and R&B charts and didn't even chart on the 200. While there are thousands of rappers that would jump at the chance of being on Billboard at all, Hurricane Chris was on the decline after having a single hit. And for whatever reason, the sophomore album would become his last. If you were singing along to Hurricane Chris music when he was sitting at the top of the music chain, it might have come as a shock to you when he suddenly vanished after releasing only 2 albums. There may have just been some behind-the-scenes elements that contributed to Hurricane Chris' disappearance from the spotlight. Apparently, he had a disagreement with the CEO of his former record label that may have led to some levels of blocking future music industry opportunities. Without a label, he released some mixtapes. His post-Polo Grounds mixtape releases included Louisianimal Part 2, Part 3, Part 3.5, and Category 5, all of which came out in 2010. Caniac would come out until 3 years later in 2013, then more extended gaps continued with Hurricane Season in 2015 and King Kane in 2017. Between 2010 and 2013, the independent version of Hurricane Chris popped on songs with people like Trey the Truth, The Game, Lil Snoop, and Soulja Boy, but the buzz wasn't there. Even if the name Hurricane Chris is a little foggy to some rap fans because it was either before their time or way after it, there's one thing that's connected to Hurricane Chris that they may recognize right off the bat. He helped to popularize the slang term ratchet, used to describe someone with loose, carefree behavior who doesn't have any concern for what people may think or the law. Not only was the word ratchet a part of his first album title, but the phrase got an entire Hurricane Chris song dedicated to in 2014 with the song Ratchet with Lil Boosie. During 2015 and beyond though, most of the attention that Hurricane Chris was getting in the media had nothing to do with his music. In July 2015, Hurricane Chris was oddly enough complaining online about rappers who use the internet to complain about rappers. He spoke about a situation that had nothing to do with him, stating that the beef between Drake and Meek Mill should have been handled on a personal level and not by pitting their fans against each other. As far as internet feuds were concerned, Hurricane Chris seemed to have forgotten that he had his own slight one with Kodak Black when Kodak hopped on Instagram that same year and said that he wanted to physically fight Lil Wayne. Hurricane Chris quickly showed Wayne some Louisiana love and was one of several rappers who defended Lil Wayne against Kodak Black's comments. Hurricane Chris even said that he was willing to fight Kodak himself on behalf of Wayne. Kodak Black then posted a short video on Instagram that referred to Hurricane's song A Baby that was around 8 years old at that point, and still Chris's only platinum hit. This would be followed up by Hurricane Chris Don't Play With Me, which was a diss towards Kodak Black that got a couple million plays on World Star Hip Hop. Despite being unsigned for years, he was still a rapper that people would tune in when he did something. But when you move Hurricane Chris' timeline 5 years forward from that moment, things changed drastically. On June 19, 2020, police responded to a shooting at a Texaco gas station in the 2600 block of Hollywood Avenue. The victim was found with multiple gunshot wounds inflicted on him. Hurricane Chris, or as the police report stated, Christopher Dooley Jr., was arrested. He was charged with 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of illegal possession of stolen items. He was held in police custody, then released on a $10,000 bond for the stolen property and $500,000 bond for the second-degree murder. After paying these bonds, he released a video, Hello World, Hello World, Hello World. I'm sure you got the news by now. I was involved in a very unfortunate incident on Friday morning. A very unfortunate incident. I want to thank everybody who's been praying for the family of the deceased and everybody who's been praying for my family. Sadly, the gunshot victim connected to this event did not survive. Danzaria Ferris Jr. was pronounced dead at Ochsner LSU Health Hospital at 32 years of age. Hurricane Chris told the cops that the shooting was in self-defense and that the man he put bullets in was attempting to steal Chris's car. However, surveillance footage contradicted Hurricane Chris' recollection of events. Chris had a Mercedes sedan that had allegedly been stolen from the state of Texas. 4 months later, it was reported in the news that Hurricane Chris was charged with murder, and 4 other murder indictments in the Shreveport area were reported, which were presented as a bloody crime wave sweeping through the area. When this trial lingered on and Hurricane Chris was facing life in prison, he started releasing music again on his YouTube channel. In 2022, he released My Bae, which sampled A Bae Bae. The song currently has 2.1 million views. It's unlikely that he would have done those numbers had he not been making headlines, but he was certainly making the best of a bad situation. On March 14th, though, years later, Hurricane Chris stood before a silent courtroom while they awaited the jury's verdict. A 4-man, 8-woman panel found Hurricane Chris not guilty. He could breathe a sigh of relief. He'd gotten his life back. In an interview with The Shade Room, Hurricane Chris said, "They wanted to give me life if I was found guilty. Now I can hug my son and think about raising him to be a man. This situation drained me and affected my health greatly. God, I give you all the glory. I got my life back, and words can't explain how I feel. Thanks to everyone who wished me well." Crucially, Hurricane Chris didn't want his son to experience the pain he felt of having a father locked up in prison. And given that Hurricane Chris is now a free man, who knows what the future might hold? We have no idea if he's dropped any music, but he likely will. And given that he had what was essentially a massive hit for him, 15 years later, after his first one with My Bae, with a couple million views, this might not be the last that we hear from him.